Hello, and welcome to the final pitch day for the 2020 Pulmonary Fibrosis Innovation Challenge, sponsored by the Three Lakes Foundation. My name is Stephen Collins, the CEO of Matter. For the last several years, we've had the opportunity to work with the Three Lakes Foundation and its predecessor, Three Lakes Partners, to help improve the lives of people with pulmonary fibrosis. In 2017, we launched the IPF Challenge, our first effort at advancing innovation for people living with pulmonary fibrosis. And this year's program kicked off in mid-February. We paused the effort a couple weeks later for obvious reasons, and then revamped our approach to put it in the context of the pandemic. And one of the things we wanted to ensure was that the problems we would identify were those most needed by the pulmonary fibrosis community. So we launched the PF Perspectives Project, which was an effort to gather the insights of patients, and caregivers, and clinicians to identify the most significant challenges for the PF community. These responses from all over the world helped shape the challenge question that we posed to entrepreneurs. How can we improve disease awareness, time to diagnosis, or care to benefit people living with pulmonary fibrosis, their caregivers, and healthcare providers? Entrepreneurs from around the world responded. We received applications from 30 cities and 10 countries. And today we'll hear from the 12 finalists who are focused on care, oxygen delivery, diagnostics, and treatment. These teams have participated in a 7-week incubator covering topics such as managing IP, working with life sciences companies and payers, refining their value propositions, shaping their stories, and engaging directly with pulmonologists, radiologists, caregivers, and patients. So today we'll see how their solutions have evolved and what they're attempting to do. At Matter, we believe the best way to advance innovation is to bring all stakeholders together. We did that for this program, and there are a number of collaborators I want to specifically acknowledge. Special thanks to the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation, AbbVie, Cigna, the COPD Foundation, DoTank, Horizon Therapeutics, Northwell Health, MICRA, Pulsinelli, and White Oak Communications, as well as a few individuals who've played really key roles. Dr. Tracy Luckhart from the University of Alabama, Dr. Max Cohen at UCSF, David Lynch from National Jewish Health, Stephanie Golden, Mary Luz Fuentes, and Ed Rafalski. Now I would like to introduce two leaders in the fight against pulmonary fibrosis. Tom Hervis is the founder of Three Lakes Foundation. He is an extraordinary entrepreneur and philanthropist. He started his company, Old World Industries, in 1973 and grew it into a world-leading chemicals company. And for the last several years, he and his family have been dedicated to improving awareness and treatments for pulmonary fibrosis with the goal of one day finding a cure. And Dana Ball is the executive director of the Three Lakes Foundation. Dana has more than 30 years experience as an innovative leader and collaborator and patient advocate. He served as an executive with the Iacocca Foundation, the Helmsley Trust, and most recently as a co-founder and CEO of T1D Exchange. He's spent most of the past 20 years developing and operationalizing high-impact programs in type 1 diabetes, and the world of the pulmonary fibrosis community is fortunate to have him at Three Lakes Foundation. So thank you to both of you, and now I will turn it over to you, Tom.
Okay, Dana, you want to say a few words to get this started? Then I'll on top.
Absolutely, thanks, Tom, and thanks, Stephen. And a special thanks to Matter, our collaborators that Stephen referenced, the stakeholders that have taken this journey with us. We just couldn't do this without everyone that's joined our efforts to find, foster, and fund novel innovations for this patient population. I want to take a minute and share a little bit about Three Lakes. We are a private foundation. that was founded due to an incredible loss caused by idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. It was founded almost 5 years ago. As Stephen referenced, it started as Three Lakes Partners. Last year, we created Three Lakes Foundation and renewed our commitment to doing everything that we can do to improve the lives of all stakeholders affected by idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And so we are really excited to be here today. Today is an important milestone, evidence that you can do remarkable things even during a pandemic, and evidence that there is opportunity to find and encourage innovation that has the promise to dramatically impact patients, caregivers, and clinicians affected by pulmonary fibrosis. So I thought this morning what we'd do is start by an interview or a conversation with Tom. And I've asked Tom to prepare to share his lessons learned and how he has navigated major problems and challenges and overcome them. So Tom, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Okay.
Tell us about your professional accomplishments.
Well, thank you, Dana. I want to talk about a few of the lessons learned. I've learned a number of things over my 55-year career working, or maybe more or less. Two things. Talk to everyone. Well, what happened back in New York City a long time ago, because my cousin married a Pakistani, I met a Pakistani Muslim from Lahore. We started talking a little bit. And then we got started in trading business, and 43 years later, we had bought plants. We had done a lot of different things. We never had an outside investor, and we started with nothing and basically built $1 billion with no outside investors and collaboration. A couple things learned there. We would fight like crazy every day. He lived next door to me virtually. We'd have tea, we'd argue, we'd fight, but at the end of the day, we had the answers and we were one team. So we built a collaborative organization. That was the key thing. The team wins. That's another one of the lessons learned. And we brought together really good people. They never left us because we accepted all ideas. Again, we would fight, argue, conflict, but out of the confliction came really good ideas, and then we did things. Another thing learned was talk is cheap, talk, but then make the phone call. And it turns out that that sort of led us right here to Dana. Dana met my daughter and talked a little bit because there was a reference there. And then Dana and I met, and we seemed to get along pretty well. And we started another team. And that team, I will tell you, is absolutely, I cannot believe the team. Number one, in our path here with the problems of IPF, there has been no resistance anywhere. Everybody has a positive attitude. It just amazes me. And we brought together a group of corporations, foundations, academic, including Yale, Mayo, Google, many others, the NIH, in fact, also. Incredible team. I couldn't believe it. And so that's what I believe in, and that's what I see here. We've got a really good team here. My mission here, frankly, and this has been my mission since I talked to Dana or got started, is to just kill the disease, because I know how horrible it is, okay? So, because I went through it. And number one, early diagnosis, and number two, let's find a cure. And we have all the pieces in place. Stephen has helped us a lot, getting a lot of good ideas here, which we're gonna have the finalists present, but we basically see everybody who has submitted ideas here, we are going to be in contact with, okay? Because you never know, you start talking, what about this, what about that, and something good happens. So the other thing I just want to communicate is a key factor in lessons learned: have fun every day. and we have fun, whether it's making money, saving lives, giving money, or whatever. That's a critical factor. And Dana, even though he doesn't look like he'd be a lot of fun, is a pretty fun guy to work with. So anyway, with that, what other lessons learned? And then the other thing, of course, and hopefully we'll see that here, sense of humor, pretty critical factor. So anyway, thank you. And that's basically who we are. And Stephen, is it coming back to you? Or is it going back to Dana?
Well, thank you, Tom. Dana, is there anything else you'd like to add before I introduce the judges?
No, I think we can get started.
Thanks so much to both of you. It's been a pleasure working with you on this, and we look forward to the presentations today. It's now my pleasure to introduce the judges for today. We wanted to have a variety of perspectives on the judging panel so that we would have clinical and scientific expertise as well as business acumen from life sciences and the insurance industry. So first we have Dr. Greg Cosgrove, who is the Chief Medical Officer of the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation. He's also an associate professor at National Jewish Health and at the University of Colorado, Denver, and he's assistant director there of the Interstitial Lung Disease Program. Dave Peterson is associate director of Global Commercial Business Development Strategy at AbbVie. He leads commercial diligence of business development opportunities in a number of therapeutic areas in his role there. And we have Ruth Tal Singer, who's the Chief Scientific Officer and Chief Science Officer and President of the COPD Foundation. Dr. Singer is an internationally recognized expert and leader in the field of respiratory care. She came to the COPD Foundation with more than 20 years of experience at GSK. And finally, we have Teralyn Romero. She's VP of Innovation at Cigna. Teralyn's been at Cigna for more than 11 years, focusing on health and wellness programs, strategic operations, and virtual health. And last year, she assumed the role of VP of Innovation, leading a team focused on affordability, predictability, and simplicity. Thank you all for joining us today and for sharing your thoughts and wisdom as we go through the pitches and presentations. It is now my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Gina Konstantakopoulos, who will provide an overview of the pitches, and she will MC the presentations. Gina.
Thanks, Stephen. Let's go over our agenda for today at a high level, just so that you as the audience know what to expect. We're nearly at the conclusion of our opening remarks, and right following this, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll begin our finalist pitches with Perx, Wealthy, Inofab, and ADAR. We'll also take a break after the first group of finalists have gone for about 15 minutes, when our next set of teams will come on. And these teams are focused on therapy and oxygen, Respignova, Agitated Solutions, O2, and Oxygen. There'll be another short break from 11:05 to 11:20. And then we'll see our final group of diagnostic tools, collagen-targeted PET, Phenomics, RecoverX, and Visionary. We hope that all of you stay on for the final 10 minutes, where we'll be having some closing remarks and also asking you to vote for your favorite teams that have presented in assisting our selection of the People's Choice Awards.
Fantastic. Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Taylor, the CEO and co-founder of Perx Health. And as Gina mentioned, I'm joining you from Sydney, Australia, where it's currently just past 2 a.m. in the morning. At Perx Health, we build digital chronic care and engagement programs which ensure no patient is left behind. Digital chronic care programs are not particularly new, and no doubt you've heard of a few of them before, and maybe even hear about a few more today. But fundamentally, they promise to solve the care component of the PF Innovation Challenge criteria. Ultimately, they should empower and enable patients to preserve health, well-being, and quality of life. However, participating in the PF Innovation Challenge over the last 7 weeks with the opportunity to connect to patients, advocacy organisations, and leading payers and providers has only confirmed our view at Perx that most existing chronic care programs continue to fail to work for the people who need them most, including those living with pulmonary fibrosis. Take Ed Rowalski, an inspirational PF patient advocate who's been taking part in the PF Innovation Program and giving us some great advice along the way. Ed's journey from severe diagnosis to empowered self-determination has been incredibly inspiring. And I've actually made the effort to connect with him through several calls and emails throughout the program. And I'm genuinely yet to meet someone as empowered, self-aware, self-motivated as Ed is in managing his condition. In 1 year, he improved his pulmonary function tests by over 10% and took control of his condition, stunning his clinicians in the process. However, when I asked Ed about the digital tools or chronic care programs he used to stay motivated, empowered, and in control of his condition, he mentioned a few basic wellness apps and then sent me about 100 pages of behavior change theory, which he'd accumulated himself over the years of taking control of his condition. And so that led me to ask, why is it in a world with 10,000 different chronic care programs and thousands of different health apps, why, instead of using any existing solutions, why was it necessary for Ed to start building and considering building his own solution? And importantly, why are existing digital chronic care programs failing those who ultimately need them the most? And fundamentally, we believe at Perx there's 3 core reasons why digital chronic care programs are failing to help the patients who need them the most. Firstly, most digital chronic care programs are focused on single high prevalence conditions, such as diabetes, asthma, or behavioural health. And this is a simplistic view of healthcare that doesn't really reflect the reality that most patients are actually managing multiple comorbidities. And many patients are actually managing conditions that don't fit neatly into these silos, just like pulmonary fibrosis. Secondly, almost all digital chronic care programs rely solely on education as a means to engage patients, despite the fact leading behavioural psychologists tell us that education is the worst way to help people form health habits and stick to treatment plans for the long term. And we also know that low health literacy is a predictor for worse outcomes. Effectively, those programs are using the one tool that is guaranteed not to work for our most at-risk patients. And finally, digital chronic care programs typically build their evidence base using high socioeconomic status cohorts of patients, which leads to biased outcomes, lack of consideration about how to enrol and engage the patients who are at most risk and need the most support. And this is the reason why our dedicated team of behavioural science nerds, software engineers, and consumer engagement specialists has built Perx Health, a truly engaging digital care program for anyone managing any condition. Our program provides comprehensive health management for any condition or comorbidity, and we successfully motivate and engage every patient on a daily basis using proven behavioural engagement strategies. And we've demonstrated the impact we can have for all cohorts of patients, regardless of their conditions, socioeconomic status, or health literacy. And we achieve this by focusing on the whole patient, individual motivational drivers, and delivering targeted outcome measures. Importantly, our approach delivers real results, and we've now delivered multiple programs across over 30 condition areas, which have achieved incredible enrolment, engagement, and outcomes for patients who need them most. Our program for Cystic Fibrosis Australia has reached a milestone recently of enrolling 1 in 4 of people living with the condition in the entire country. And our program for a leading US provider network has enrolled over 40% of new patients. Once enrolled, patients consistently engage with our solution on a daily basis, recording over 97% adherence to treatment and a result of improved quality of life measures and underlying clinical biomarkers. What's more, these outcomes have now been validated by leading research organisations in multiple peer-reviewed publications in leading academic journals, including a gold standard randomised controlled trial where Perx demonstrated superior adherence, improved health outcomes, and impact for the most complex chronic disease patients. Thanks to the adaptable and flexible nature of our program, in less than a week, we were able to deliver a Perx program for pulmonary fibrosis management, inclusive of PF medications, specialist appointments, pulmonary function tests, care team connectivity, a social community, and other health tasks like mindfulness and symptom tracking for our patient advocate, Ed, to start using, testing, and giving us feedback on. He finally has the product that he envisaged at his fingertips as he pulled together those hundreds of pages of behavioural science documents. And most importantly, every other patient, pulmonary fibrosis patient, starting their journey can benefit from this as well. We'd like to extend our thanks to the Matter team, the Three Legs Foundation, and all the advocates involved in the PF Innovation Challenge. We have two asks today. Firstly, we'd love to connect with PF advocacy organisations to partner and deliver perks to the PF community at scale. And secondly, if any payers, healthcare providers, or pharma companies are interested in learning more about how we're building digital chronic care programs that leave no patient behind, please get in touch. My email is scott@perxhealth.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott. Now we're going to move into our question and answer session. I'm going to go first to Greg Cosgrove from the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation. Go ahead, Greg.
Unmuted. Thank you so much. Really great vision and trying to tackle an unmet need. In other applications that have been attempted in this space, the assumption that the engagement and the daily acquisition of data, particularly active acquisition rather than passive acquisition, has been unsuccessful outside a very highly motivated group. And clinically, my experience comparing patients with pulmonary fibrosis to asthma patients to patients with CF is apples and oranges. And so I'm curious, do you have, beyond an incredibly highly motivated individual, do you have other experience with a larger cohort to suggest that that engagement strategy will be successful in this specific group?
Absolutely. Now, I can't speak specifically for pulmonary fibrosis, but when we talk about patients who aren't highly motivated, that is an area we have quite a bit of expertise in. Our randomized controlled trial with the University of Sydney was actually run with one of the public hospital groups here who explicitly recruited their frequent flyers as such, so people who were in and out of hospital multiple times a year because they struggled to self-manage at home. And so they were pre-selected as poor self-managers before they went into the randomized controlled trial. And we saw that presented through initial surveys on entering the trial, their kind of initial medication adherence prior to entering the trial, and we still managed to deliver really strong outcomes for them over and above control. Equally, with one of the national health plans over here, they had the exact same concern that you've just raised, that most of the people who put their hands up for these type of chronic care programs or digital chronic care programs, potentially it may be the more healthy or the more engaged or the more motivated. And so we actually surveyed them using the risky medication adherence score on their way into the program. And actually over 75% of participants were either low or medium self-managers before entering the program. We were still able to record over 90% adherence levels, but also engaging them actively, as you say, as opposed to passively 3 to 4 times a day in that program. And so I think that's because we don't necessarily rely on education as the mechanism for engagement. We use a range of behavioral science strategies that really appeal to a much more diverse set of patients than necessarily a simple or remote patient monitoring program or a education program would stand alone. And so we have seen that really strong impact on even those patients who prior to entering the program have been would have been classified as poor self-managers or demotivated or lower health engagement.
Great, thank you.
Terrific. I'm going to send our next question to Tara Lynn. Tara Lynn, do you have a question for Perx?
I do, in fact. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
All right, wonderful. So first off, congratulations on getting up at 2 a.m. and sounding more coherent than I do at 8 a.m. My question to you is, what did you do to understand the customer journey? I recognize that you guys quickly created an app, I think you said within a week. So how did you understand a customer journey, especially for a condition like pulmonary fibrosis, where individuals experience very different things with the condition? Thank you.
For sure. I mean, we've obviously done a lot of work in other condition areas where that exact same dynamic exists, where one person's journey doesn't necessarily reflect another's. And I think one of the big asks for coming out of this program is to work with patient advocacy organizations to better understand those many journeys that patients might experience. Our first port of call, literally following the kickoff meeting at the start of the PF Innovation Challenge, was actually to request Gina to connect me with Ed directly. And I've had numerous phone calls with him, not just about his journey, but also about many of the other patients living with pulmonary fibrosis who he's experienced through his existing advocacy work, to understand how where he's at with managing his condition differs from people who have just been diagnosed or other people who've had different paths through their treatment, and we've factored that into the solution that we've built. But ultimately, one of the things we pride ourselves on is actually being very configurable to different patient journeys, but also continuously seeking feedback. We'd release a new version of our product every 2 weeks, and that's continuously taking into account new patient feedback that we've received by the many thousands of patients using our app.
Terrific. I think we have time for one more. Let's go to Dave.
Hey, Scott, good evening. Thank you for the presentation. My question is on, I guess, adoption and engagement. So the IPF patient population tends to be an older patient population. So people tend to be diagnosed, given as a diagnosis of exclusion when they're 50s and 70s. How do you get that population to use an app? How do you kind of drive adoption and engagement with older folks?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is an area that we've demonstrated impact on in multiple other condition areas. So our randomized controlled trial with the University of Sydney, the average age of that cohort was 59.5 years old. So it's not as if we're skewed young. It's not as if you're skewed to more kind of, I guess, tech literate. Patients, they're very much our bread and butter is that 55 to 75 age group across a number of our different programs that we run. I think there has to be design considerations into how you build technology for that age group to make it engaging but easily accessible, and also consider, I guess, the value proposition. The kind of it needs to be kind of a shared value proposition for the reason as to why someone would enroll in that program. Possibly beyond just that it's good for their health. And then similarly, thinking about how do we create long-term engagement, I think is really important. I mean, we all know that typical health apps often have low enrollment and low continuous engagement and quite a large drop-off. And so that's why we use behavioral strategies and consumer engagement strategies to continuously engage. We see extremely high retention. And as I mentioned in the presentation, we actually see really strong adoption of our product. When we've worked with US provider networks, we see 40% plus new patients coming into the program. And we've also successfully rolled out our product in various different condition use cases in Australia where we've seen similar adoption.
Super. Thank you everyone for your time. My name's Abhishek. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Wealthy Therapeutics. So Wealthy was built out of a mission that could we really solve for specific conditions and improve health outcomes as a result of that using digital therapeutics. The honest truth is worldwide, we're not able to solve for IPF at all. And we spent some time now on the pulmonary side, and I'll walk you through the way we see the picture. But essentially, we've set out on a mission that can we improve the lives of 10 million patients by 2030? And within that, one huge area of focus for us is obstructive airway diseases. And within that, IPF falls right in. We've set out on this mission about 4 years ago. The way we end up doing this is really using a full stack digital therapeutics platform that focuses on driving better patient outcomes by augmenting each and every stakeholder in the patient journey. We have the yin yang, where we use that base platform to design and deploy digital therapeutic candidates so that we can enable outcome-based business models, outcome-based care for each and every one of our partners. We take proven medical interventions and guidelines that work, add behavioral science and gamification on top, and drive an entire adherence pathway to behave as a companion digital therapeutic to augment health outcomes at scale. We started our journey and cardiometabolic issues. Since that time, our next therapeutic area, which we're really excited about over the last year and a half, has been on the respiratory side. Our first candidate, it was asthma, pulmonary arterial hypertension, which sits at the intersection of cardiometabolic and respiratory, is right up there. COPD and fibrosis are well on their way. And essentially what we do is we take these candidates and then we commercialize them as a companion digital therapy, largely with pharma and device partners and followed by payer provider partners to be able to drive an improvement in outcomes. An example is what we've already done with our asthma candidate, where we've taken, whether satellite traffic data, connected inhaler data, onboarded sort of patient trigger history and driving better patient outcomes, lower exacerbations, lower risk of hospitalization, better symptom-free days at scale. But that's sort of where it begins. The digital therapeutic candidate is essentially working slowly but surely to enable a full stack digital respiratory care platform for our partners. Right now, the one that we've moved the most in respiratory care is asthma, and that's the one we're super excited about. And then there's a lot more coming, because fibrosis comes within that universe really sweetly, where it's essentially enabling better self-monitoring through connected diagnostics, enabling better awareness and self-care and self-education through an entire get to know your condition better and augment the skills to manage it better, better clinical insights and AI analytics that can really work for patients real time, and episodic and continuous clinical decision support for different stakeholders, and really driving better symptom tracking, better biomarker tracking, and better quality of life at scale. So as we do this, of course, it starts with going to patients, understanding their pain points, really working with pulmonologists to be able to understand how treatment pathways really work in different markets. And then through that, enabling patient-facing tools using our base platform for better patient data capture and better engagement. All of this is, by the way, still under development for fibrosis. But whether it's educational therapy, it's really driving active and passive data capture, whether it's driving better treatment compliance on one end, or really working towards specific areas of the treatment pathway, like pulmonary rehabilitation, where we really can do a lot more, especially augmented with all the connected devices that are out there, but be that one port of call, that Google Nav, if you will, that's really helping a patient manage their condition better, which is what we've been consistently doing across all the board, whether it's oxygen therapy support, which we're building out through education modules, and then just having our concierge setup that is already built out and really enabling sort of different pieces of the financing infrastructure and the refills infrastructure so that last mile is taken care of, and just enabling a better personalized symptom management journey. So that's self-management, better data for healthcare stakeholders, all of them really chime in. What we've done in other therapeutic areas, hopefully paves the way for what we will be doing here. Clinically validated published results already exist on our combination digital therapy for type 2 diabetes, for hypertension, for dyslipidemia, and more cardiology conditions as they come up, where we've been able to show and publish real-world outcomes at scale as to how this combination can really drive an improvement in outcomes and sustain those outcomes over a period of time. We've learned both the easy way and the hard way. We do work very closely with enterprise partners to be able to ensure the impact to patients is really scalable. And at the same time, we've been able to operate and go live in South Asia, Southeast Asia, now Europe. And by the numbers, we're now a 100 team member company in 7 indications, 600 cities and a few languages. GDPR and software as a medical device certified, really work exclusively with enterprise partners to be able to drive an improvement in outcomes. Have raised some capital from those that really believe in our vision and want to scale with us at scale. And really the team is a mix of clinicians, behavioralists, ex-healthcare entrepreneurs, care delivery experts, regulatory and compliance, all driving one thing and one thing only: how do we drive better health outcomes at scale? So that's a bit on us. I'll pause here and would love to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Let's start with Ruth for the first question.
Hello. Thank you for a great presentation. My main question is, does the program link to electronic medical records, or does it involve manual entry of the data?
So it's both, Ruth. We use interoperability ecosystem partners in the middle. So for example, we're working today with the National Health Authority in South Asia and India specifically, where we're integrating into middleware that allows us to be able to pull and push data into EMR, EHR. Otherwise, we sort of use the base guidelines. But in a lot of markets, depending, like we're operating in Spain, where we're working with a third party to be able to integrate with EMR, EHR. So it works both ways. We started with an infrastructure that has to work for manual, but the goal is always how do we plug in more and more data pipes to make it scalable.
Thank you. So the data are loaded to the cloud. If it doesn't integrate to EMR, the GDPR is for loading data to the cloud?
Absolutely. So we're GDPR already, so everything goes into the cloud and stays there. But as we get interoperability and integration into EMR, EHR, it just makes life a lot easier because essentially we're making it easier for the physician and for the larger health systems to be able to drive better outcomes.
Thank you.
And I have a question.
Great, Tom. Go for it.
Yeah. What kind of a human connection do you have on an ongoing basis with the patient?
Fantastic question. So it's two parts. We have the paramedicals, which could be, so we enable health system paramedicals to come on board where there's real-time monitoring, real-time intervention. What I'll even do is maybe reshare a screen to be able to answer this question better. Let's see. Okay, there we go. So if you see what you have in front of you, these are HCP-facing tools where whether it's paramedicals, health coaches, counselors, they all sort of get a real-time dashboard for monitoring, chatting, calling, video calling, because at the end of the day, they are the control tower to make sure that alerts and escalations that the system sends, they're able to act on it wherever necessary. And we also have the physician enabled through the system as well for telemedicine. So both exist. It totally depends upon the use case that's there on the ground. We currently have live use cases where both 100% AI is out on the ground where there are no humans whatsoever for what some of the projects that we're doing in type 2 diabetes. And then we've got work that we're doing in cardiology where there is detailed virtual nurses as well as virtual cardiologists available. So the platform enables that and it integrates into other telemedicine platforms as well. But it depends upon what the end use case is and how we can best serve the patient in that market.
Do you have a number of success stories that you could put forward?
Yes, to an extent. We have success. I would define success largely on outcomes. So we've got about 22 real world publications that we can showcase. But on live deployment, those are the partners that you see on the screen. Those are some of the partners that we today work with. And we don't just work with them, on the R&D side. If you see, we're live, like with Roche Diabetes Care, every single blood sugar monitor has us embedded in the box as a combination with some drugs with our partner in Cipla on the cardiology and diabetes side. We're combined as a drug with the drug as well. But really, it's not enrollment success, if I would call it. I think clinical outcomes are what matters, and I'm happy to separately share a link which has a lot more of this information available on what we've done.
Thank you.
Great. We have time for one more question. Let's go to Dave.
Good morning. Thank you for the presentation. I noticed on one of your slides, you had a screenshot of like a text feature between the patient and I don't know if it was a therapist or so, but I know IPF is a very difficult disease to live with, right? There's no disease modifying agent. The whole goal of treatment with standard of care is to reduce the rate of decline. Could you maybe talk a little bit more about that engagement with like a therapist or someone for like the mental health support, just to keep patients optimistic and engaged in their care?
Absolutely. So I think you hit the nail on the head, right? It's not, there's no substitute to this. So For example, we use voice, image, text, call, video call. I mean, every single use case that you can think of, because at the core, it's about motivation. It's about mental strengthening, mental well-being, and that matters. So this is already live across different therapeutic areas. I think the difference is for every condition, we get the unique opportunity to enable the back end with the biomarkers that are really necessary, so that virtual health coach, which we call it as, because it's regardless of counseling or a diabetes specialist or respiratory therapist, they're all coaches that are helping patients to manage their condition better. That platform is already exists and live and working across tens of thousands of patients.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
We have time for, I think, one more question. I'm going to turn to Greg.
Great, really exciting proposal. One of the challenges in the pandemic area is engaging physicians given limited time and resources. So the collection of data and the overwhelming interpretation of those data is, in my opinion, a significant barrier to great solutions like you provided. So one, at least in the United States, is there integration into payer-provider relationships so that this is not all pro bono? I see that as a potential concern, that if those providers cannot justify that interaction to their institutions, the adoption could be affected.
Absolutely, great question. Simple answer is we're not reinventing the wheel. There are beautiful RPM codes that already exist. In the absence of that, we work with our partners to submit HOER data and reduction in cost of care data to make it useful. Because at the core, if physicians aren't getting incentivized, they're not going to be engaged, regardless of how intuitive you make the system. So we operate in markets where the codes already exist. Life is really easy. In markets where it doesn't, we plug and play with payer provider networks, either through a way to reduce costs and to improve efficiency on the care delivery side, or we work with the device or the pharma company as a patient support to be able to get ourselves in. But whichever way, the economics need to make sense, as you rightly said. Otherwise, you'll always struggle with large-scale adoption.
Great, thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sadie Nuz from Inofab Health marketing team. Today, we're here to tell you about our journey in creating our personal spirometer integrated remote patient monitoring system. Actually, our journey started 5 years ago when one of our colleagues was diagnosed with a chronic respiratory disease. Seeing his interminable and tough pulmonary function testing experiences in hospitals, we started to work on respiratory care. We wanted to be the solution. We wanted to diminish the hospital-bound lifestyle chronic diseases forced upon its patients. And since then, we've created SpiroHome and SpiroCloud to revolutionize respiratory care. So let's talk about some pulmonary fibrosis facts. Due to pulmonary fibrosis, patients have faced increasing shortness of breath and immobility, which makes regular hospital visits for tests a challenge for them. However, testing is vital. Daily measurements of one of the most important tests for lung health, forced vital capacity, FVC, provides a more sensitive and earlier prediction of disease behavior and outcome than traditional periodic hospital-based readings. Home monitoring can improve the precision of endpoint assessments, allowing for greater efficiency in clinical trials of therapeutics for IPF. So, in responding to these approved facts, we created the perfect system. Meet SpiroHome and SpiroCloud, a clinically accurate pocket-sized spirometer and remote patient monitoring infrastructure. The world's first ultrasonic spirometer is SpiroHome. With clinical-level ultrasonic spirometry in their pocket, patients can perform pulmonary function tests with clinical precision anytime and anywhere. With SpiroHome, daily FVC tests can be conducted at home, and it allows its patients to monitor their lung function tests by simply connecting their devices to their phones via Bluetooth and diminishes the need to go to the hospitals. Spire Home was compared with conventional laboratory spirometers in Australia, and according to reports, it's fully compliant with clinical spirometers, its trustworthy performance and data collection. And if you were to worry about the mobile application, no need. It's a hassle-free mobile application, and if you're not tech-savvy, that's not a problem either. With its user-friendly interface, especially designed for elderly patients, Spire Home offers a pulmonary function test like no other. You can think of it as your digital nurse. Step by step, it guides you to breathe, demonstrate through techniques, gives you error detection signals when the test is wrongly performed, and finally, creates trend graphs for the patients to observe their progress. With Spire Home, we give the control to our patients, and no disease is uncontrollable for them. The Spire Home app is synced with our web-based remote patient monitoring system, Spire Cloud. With this system, healthcare professionals can track their patients' tests instantaneously and continuously, anywhere and anytime. So with continuous monitoring, we can detect symptoms of upcoming severe attacks or understand the course of the disease better, and this helps for early diagnosis. So with this, the health professionals can take, at some point, life-changing preventions. On the right side, you can see a healthcare provider screen. The data of the patient is shown. The healthcare provider can set alerts for a certain threshold value and then gets notified or alerts via email when the threshold is reached. And real-time detection of FVC decline can be monitored using this system. And let's compare Spire Home, our Inofab Health products, with the other products in the market. The table shows clearly why we're the best in the market. We bring a calibration-free, clinically accurate platform solution with ATS 2019 compliance to our patients' homes. Inofab Health has many global partners, and one of our strategic investors, ERT, is a Philadelphia-based global leader in clinical endpoint data collection. We create every software and technology we use. And so, not only has our technology, but also our design has been awarded many times, including Good Design Award, Red Dot winner, Core 77 Design Awards, and German Design Awards. We currently have 5 trademarks, 5 design patents, and 7 patent applications. And since getting our CE mark in May 2019, we've entered to more than 50 countries. And currently we have actively using 15,000 active users around the world, and ongoing clinical studies based to improve the efficacy of home care technology infrastructures in the United States, Australia, and Turkey. We're currently in the FDA approval process, so we'll be in the market in the 3rd quarter of 2021. And now we told you a lot about our products and what's the real value of our products. For patients, we offer to increase life quality by diminishing the compulsory hospital-bound lifestyle and decrease the risk of cross-contamination in hospitals by doing spirometry tests at home. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic in Australia, our healthcare professionals and distributors suggested their patients to use Spire Home at their homes and diminish their need to go to the hospitals and the cross-contamination risk that it brought with it. And patients conducted their FVC tests at their homes, and healthcare professionals analyzed their progression remotely, so everyone was safe. We provide collective and reliable data for future treatment research and a centralized patient monitoring system for doctors and clinics. We decrease the cost of unwanted hospitalization and travel costs for our payers. And let's conclude. With our team of 26, our mission is to create products that play a meaningful role in people's lives. Thank you for listening to our journey as Inofab Health.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm going to send our first question to Tara Lynn.
Hey there, I had to get off mute. First off, thank you so much for your presentation. My question to you is, what is your distribution model? Is this a direct consumer model, direct to part? And then secondarily, can you share a little bit about maybe some satisfaction scores from clinicians and individuals using your platform? Thank you.
Hi, I am Martin from Inofab Health. I'm a co-founder of the Inofab Health, so I can jump in here. Actually, we have local distributor model for the entering the market strategy, because as you know very well, whole countries need to be regulated by different terms and different regulation borders. So that's reason we choose the right partner for entering the local markets. We reach the 15 countries for that purposes. So we have 15 local distributors around the world. But on the other hand, we are using online channels to reach the end users. We are available on Amazon UK and DE and our website. But we observed the main problem on the online channels. Patients need to awareness of the tracking the lung health. So that reason we choose the channels towards the doctors. Firstly, our local partners goes to key opinion leader doctors. After that, our products will reach the end users and patients.
Great, thank you for that. Let's take our next question from Greg.
Well, thank you. I share the enthusiasm. It's really a great initiative. I am curious if regulatory agencies have adopted this opportunity and it's been validated so that you can achieve those goals that you clearly articulated are important in terms of identifying endpoints of efficacy.
Yeah, actually, we are care about these issues because in technological side, our spirometers are the same accuracy with the other kind of clinical type of spirometers, because while taking CE marked, we enforce these information, and our validation, performance validation, is reliable for the spirometer standards. So we prove that. But the efficacy of the home care is another issue. In Australia case, for example, we started to work with CF patients, cystic fibrosis patients, because they in the pandemic days they couldn't go to the hospital to perform tests. Whole pulmonary function test labs was closed. So that reason our devices were well matched with their needs. But as we talk in our presentation, we are on some clinical studies to prove the efficacy and efficiency and cost efficiency on the market. We are starting with Boston Children's Hospital. We have advisor in the Boston Children's Hospital, and another clinical studies are keeping in Australia. So we will show the efficacy and how we can change the aspect from the hospital to home care. But technical side, it was proved on the lab and on the clinical studies, but cost of treatment or efficacy in according to decreasing the cost of hospitalization, we are working on these kind of studies, and we believe that our products will address these kind of issues.
Thank you very much.
Great. Our final question will come from Ruth.
Hi, my main question around differentiation is around cost. So one of the key limitations I think was mentioned is how much it costs to provide mobile spirometers. So could you talk a little bit about how you would be addressing that? How would you differentiate?
In the same point, like finding a local partners, we are trying to provide local solutions, because whole market needs to be different issues on that topic. So, for example, in Europe, our end user price is about 300 euros, including the VAT. But SpiroCloud is depending on monitoring system in hospital. Our pricing model is depending on the patient numbers who monitors by healthcare professionals, but we are trying to find the right way in the reimbursement system, because we need to create a sustainable model in the market. Selling the just only product is not enough. So we are trying to find a way to prove in the reimbursement system. So our end user price is very affordable when you compare with the clinical type of spirometers, or comparing with the going to hospital and performing tests at clinics. So it will be new approach to performing tests.
May I ask a quick question on reimbursement and access? So I was kind of wondering if that was the strategy to drive reimbursement and access, is if the goal is to reduce exacerbations and hospitalizations, is the value proposition look for a payer or a national health system? Patients can identify when they're, several metrics are getting at a critical level, and then they can intervene, presumably if they're diagnosed on either pirfenidone or nintedanib, they can intervene with like supplemental oxygen therapy or like physical therapy. Is that kind of the value prop you're making to payers and health systems?
Yeah, actually, the end of the tunnel will be that point that you mentioned that, but currently we observe the potential in the market from remote test to virtual test experience. Virtual test experience means while performing test at home, your nurse is coaching from SpiroCloud platform, because when we go to the Australian market, our early adopter doctors mentioned these kind of problems, because currently our devices is just only based on only device sale model, but it should be service model. When they give the devices to patients, doctors or hospitals cannot reimburse this kind of model. So that reason we started to develop virtual test experience. That means while performing test, coaching is the simultaneously keeping on the other side, and it will be a service model. From our approach will be transformed to selling device to service model according to market needs. We observe this potential. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Satya from Untitled Health. Our mission is to improve the quality of life of patients with chronic condition. Every single one of you knows someone with a chronic condition. I'm one of you all struggling to manage my mom's health. She's not alone. More than half of US population have at least one chronic condition that requires regular monitoring of health, especially like for PF patients or pulmonary fibrosis patient, which is a very challenging disease, and it feels like a ticking time bomb in your lungs, and people are prevented from doing any kind of activities, and which kind of like worsening their quality of life. PF has many comorbidities such as COPD, hypertension, heart disease, which significantly worsen its prognosis, symptom burden, and disease severity. The goal is to reduce the symptoms, improve the health status, preserve the lung functions, minimize any adverse event, and reduce the frequency of an acute exacerbation, ideally improve survival. So in order to, for this complex condition, patients still receive no support, and then physicians still use inefficient, error-prone indicators like lung function tests or like even like oxygen saturation alone, while others use less specific wearable devices. But patients are tired of these inconclusive, time-consuming, and expensive solution. And however, there are early physiological signs in the heart and lungs that have shown to like detect early any kind of exacerbation or hospitalization. For example, spirometer value and respiratory flow morphology have shown to be early and more reliable indicators of exacerbation and decompensation, but they are not readily used today in a home setting. What if we could merge all these different devices that measures dyspnea, infection, hypertension, arrhythmia, and many, many more things into a simple to use device that can collect everything through a simple breath? Sounds like a science fiction, right? That's why we created MouthLab. It is a non-invasive, at-home, rapid health assessment device that measures more than 10 vital health parameters. The user is going to be measuring with our device. Today, MouthLab measures temperature, blood pressure, ECG, oxygen saturation, respiratory flow morphology, heart rate variability, cough, and spirometer, which are not only just relevant for monitoring PF-related patients at home, but also help detect exacerbation and dyspnea. So within 30 seconds, the user just breathes into the device normally. At the end, as you could see, she performs a lung function test. We take a multi-parameter biomarker approach to create a unique biosignature that composed of multiple digital and medical biomarkers that intelligently reflects an individual's true health. So the data from the device is seamlessly sent to our secure HIPAA-compliant cloud, where our proprietary analytics engine uses data science-enabled algorithms to generate actionable data and key health insights for early identification of patterns of onsets, progression, and exacerbation. Such a comprehensive tool is even more meaningful for a patient like PF, which they are managing their coexisting conditions. So in a workflow point of view, patient receive these devices as a part of their post-discharge care kit. Patient uses the device daily in monitoring their progress. We offer a disease-specific questionnaire, self-reported quality of life and symptom measurement, in addition to MouthLab as a measurement of objective data. Patients also receive real-time feedback and recommendation to make sustainable behavior changes in order to improve their quality of life. This data then can be accessed through physician dashboard or triage or surveillance dashboard for timely intervention and treatment modification. And through secure APIs, we also connect to EMRs and other trusted partners services so that we can accelerate decentralized clinical trials, which will be our first go-to-market strategy. By measuring the overall health of an individual, we enable early detection of exacerbation, reduce hospitalization and ER visit, followed by optimization of drug or treatment therapy. Eventually, we deliver greater clinical and economic benefit to all the key stakeholders. This would be first of a kind digital therapeutic solution or prescription digital therapeutic solution focused on pulmonary fibrosis patients, which would start from day one after their diagnosis or even before, and shall follow them throughout their life like a care companion, which is a real value. And we offer this through subscription model to pharma and payers, but we also wanted to leverage the CCM and RPM codes for helping physicians to generate additional revenue. But we're not stopping with the PF or COPD. We aim to design and deliver evidence-based digital therapeutics that are focused on helping with various life-threatening conditions. And over the past few months, we have gotten enormous amount of traction for our device to monitor COVID patients because of the relevance of the things that we measured today. We also clinically proven through several studies at Hopkins, and we also got in the attention of the regulators who have expedited the review process of our 510(k) application. Exactly same reason due to the relevance of COVID, and we're expecting major certifications and clearances by January. We also have strong IP protection and robust patent portfolio. We established major partnership, built mature supply chains, and created enough traction to help propel our technology. just purely by the number of measurements that we measure, we are far ahead of any of our competitors. And this is just not a one-off device. The current ability of our device to measure all these different biomarkers are only the beginning. Because the device actually is placed in the mouth, it has access to breath and saliva, which in turn gives access to many biological indicators of health. And we have great supporters and partners, and this award-winning technology have been phenomenal and a true testament of a current market need that extends far beyond respiratory condition. And this is our grain. This is not our first rodeo. We have done this in the past. We have 15 years of experience. We are Johns Hopkins spin-off company. We also surrounded ourselves with relevant experts in a number of fields that is incredibly germane to what we are doing. And finally, we are providing improved health outcomes for patients through precision medicine, smarter engagement and tracking tools for caregivers, and drug and titration tool for pharmaceutical companies. Join us. Let's provide PF patients a chance to a better life. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great presentation. Let's take our first question from Greg.
Hi, Greg.
Good morning. Really fascinating technology and the capabilities to introduce biomarkers beyond the physiologic ones that I think is really exciting. I guess one of the challenges, we don't know which at least biological biomarkers accurately predict the progression of disease in IPF. And I'm curious, beyond the FVC and the CT scan, have you initiated studies to try to validate some of those that might augment the clinical care as also facilitate clinical trial efficiency?
Absolutely. So we're working with the physicians at Johns Hopkins right now to explore a lot of other things because, for example, ECG is a critical parameter. Heart rate variability is another critical parameter. And I also mentioned the respiratory flow morphology, which we are measuring, can actually predict dyspnea at a very early stage. So our goal is we just submitted an IRB application to Johns Hopkins so that we are planning to start a study early next year, coinciding with our FDA clearance.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Great. The next question will go to Ruth.
Hi, thank you for a very clear presentation. I have two questions. One of them, you mentioned biomarkers. So looking at this, is there a collection or are you looking at exhaled volatile organic compounds? What is it that you're looking at? That's one question. The second one, the normal for pulmonary fibrosis patients or other respiratory conditions depends on the person. Is the predictive analytics or the algorithm, does it start from what's normal for the individual, or are you looking at a group-based normal to look at changes?
Fantastic questions. You helped me to answer two things that I didn't mention. One of the things is we're starting with biophysical measurements. We have identified a couple of parameters that we measure using MouthLab, but then the future is getting into biochemistry, like volatile compounds. We're putting in a lot of sensors in the mouthpiece, and so basically, essentially, this would be the collection of breath and saliva biomarkers, which is the future, and we are currently working on it, and hopefully by end of 2021 or early 2022, we should have those parameters ready to go. And then, sorry, I missed your second question, which was...
So the predictive analytics around worsening, everybody starts from a different baseline.
Yeah. Absolutely. So one of the main things that we are doing is we are providing this device and training the patients while they are in the hospital. If they are admitted for the hospital, we go through the entire process. We measure the baseline, we train them, and then we send them home with the kit. Basically, in that way, we also have a set of rules and thresholds where the physicians can put in the baseline for that particular patient. This is essentially an amazing tool for precision medicine, and we are proud that we could be able to do this at a very early stage.
If I may ask one more question, if that's okay. You mentioned HIPAA compliance. Can you comment on GDPR?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we have taken into consideration is we wanted to get into all the other things as we are planning to move past the US and into other places. We are working on it, and by the time we get our clearance, even that would be, we would also get the certification for that.
Can I ask a question? How many patient journeys do you have? And do you have any idea of the success rate with these various journeys, and you know, how far along they've come along the trail?
So we have been interviewing a lot of patients. We did a formative study with IPF patients, and one of the things that we're trying to understand at this point is to like see their life flow, which we really wanted to put in a solution like this in front of their hand or in their hands. So the success of this is really dependent also on like additional coaching, right? So that's where we also set up a command center where we wanted to actually have nurses and nurse practitioners to help them to guide through the entire process, from like learning how to do spirometer and then actually understanding what their values mean, to actually also completing subjective surveys without the need for any additional burden to these users. So I think 2021 would be a great year where we can provide more answers to some of these key questions.
Thank you.
Excellent. We have time for one more question from Tara Lynn.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I have a two-part question. First of all, what's the cost of the device and who shoulders it? And then secondarily, what's your current customer utilization?
So cost of the device, and what was the second one? Sorry. Who pays for it? Hello?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So right now, the cost of the device, we because we're building in small batches, it's a little bit more expensive, but we wanted to get it to as low as $200. But from the payment point of view, we're taking a prescription-based methodology so that the device technology and services will be bundled into one service. Right now, we are talking to almost 8 of the top 10 pharma companies to actually put this device as a part of their clinical trial or decentralized clinical trial efforts. So right now, pharma and contract research organizations are paying for it or would be paying for it. But ultimately, this device can also be reimbursed through CCM and RPM programs. The second part of the question was, sorry.
Yeah, the second part of the question is around your current customer utilization.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Current?
Yeah, sorry. Second part of the question is around your current customer utilization.
Okay. No, I think from our point of view, we have only a handful of studies that are going on right now. But one of the major things that we wanted to start working on is like get our CE mark, so that some of the studies that we wanted to do in the Europe will be initiated next year. So we are looking at least 5 to 6 customers in the next few months.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cliff Hansel, and I'm the CEO of Respinova, an Israel-based respiratory device company. I would like to begin by thanking the Three Lakes Foundation, the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation, and Matter Health for the privilege of participating in this challenge. At Respinova, our mission is to improve the lives of patients with respiratory diseases. For us, this mission is not just about helping the hundreds of millions of patients suffering from these conditions. Our team also has family and friends who suffer from severe respiratory disease and have lost loved ones to these diseases. IPF is a disease that is still in dire need of new therapies. There are over 30 new drug treatments in the pipeline at various stages, and some of these may actually make it to the finish line. However, oral and IV administered drugs are limited by potential toxicity from having to travel through the body. There are a handful of therapies in the pipeline taking the more direct route, but even these face challenges of reaching all the way down to their targets. So why is that? IPF is generally thought of as a disease that affects only the alveoli, the small air sacs at the end of the lung where oxygen enters the body. However, it was observed as far back as the 70s that narrowed small airways leading to the alveoli play a role in IPF. This has come back to the forefront as recently as February with a new study in The Lancet. As well, over the last 10 years, so much has been written about the role of overproduction of mucus and its contribution to IPF that Dickey and colleagues recently wrote an article entitled, "It's in the Mucus." I call these two double trouble because not only are mucus and airway narrowing blocking the delivery of drugs, but also in and of themselves, they are contributing to the fibrosis process. So how can we help? We have developed a device called PulseHaler, which uses a series of air pressure pulses at different frequencies delivered to the lung in a home-based 20-minute treatment. PulseHaler has 3 synergistic effects. First, these pressure pulses vibrate their way down to narrowed or closed airways, gently and repeatedly pushing at the opening until they pop back open. Second, the vibrations lower the viscosity of the mucus that may be clogging the airways, kind of like shaking up a bottle of ketchup when it's stuck. And third, the positive pressure allows the cilia, the little hairs in the lung responsible for transporting this mucus, to resynchronize and start working again. These synergistic effects have already been clinically proven to improve patients. In a randomized placebo-controlled study conducted on COPD patients, in just 2 weeks of treatment, PulseHaler produced a significant increase in walking capacity, as well as in forced vital capacity, and perhaps most importantly, in quality of life scores. And while there are differences between IPF and COPD patients, to the extent that mucus and airway narrowing is also part of IPF, there is a high likelihood we can help IPF patients as well. The second way we can help is to improve the delivery of drugs to the deepest part of the lung. If airway narrowing and mucus are keeping drugs from reaching the lung, then in theory, removing these obstacles should help. But this is more than just a theory. We conducted a second clinical trial where we compared where drugs deposit when administered through PulseHaler versus a regular nebulizer. This study showed by imaging on CT that PulseHaler improves the relative deposition to the deep lung by over 200%. This gives us 2 very quick paths to success. To paraphrase Tom Hervis from his motivational message at the start of this challenge, we need solutions now, not 10 years from now. We have already submitted PulseHaler to FDA under the 510(k) process, and we can be ready to conduct a PulseHaler study specifically on IPF patients within about 6 months, with results in under 1.5 years. In parallel, we can be initiating a drug delivery study, partnering with any of the pharmas that are developing an inhaled therapy, which could begin in as little as 1.5 years. We have a top-notch team to execute on this with over 125 years of experience in medical devices and a hands-on board of advisors with tremendous depth in respiratory. So to summarize, what we have is a truly novel approach to IPF therapy that can be used either in parallel to drug therapy or to enhance it. Since many of you are from the Chicago area, you can think about this like giving Patrick Kane 2 shots on goal from right in front of the net. If you do, you know he's going to score. This is a low risk, high return potential with super low cost relative to current therapies. And we have a great team to make this happen. All we need now is your support. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll be happy to take questions.
Excellent. I'm going to send our first question to Dave.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the presentation. My question is for, I guess, agents in development. Do they need to be optimized for your platform, or is it kind of a plug and play model?
It's kind of a plug and play model. We've worked in the past with nebulized solutions. If you're going to put this into a powder type device, there'd be a little development to make that happen, but nothing on a grand scale.
Okay, so the CMC work is pretty easy. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Terrific. I'm going to send our next question to Ruth.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. So I have 2 questions. One is, what is the estimated cost, and how do you think, how affordable would it be, because it would be an at-home device? And my second question is the supply chain. So how quickly do you think that you could provide a lot of devices if it were to be in a clinical trial or even in using it in patients. So how would you step up production?
Yeah, two great questions. So first of all, the total cost of ownership of this device, if it's spread appropriately across its use life, is probably about $1,500 a year, including consumables. There is a consumable in the device in addition to the system cost. So if you compare that to, say, one of the antifibrotic drugs at $100,000 a year, it looks like a pretty cheap solution and doesn't have to add a ton to the equation to become, I think, a very valuable tool. From the perspective of production, we're already tooled for most of the device. It's been submitted to FDA, as I mentioned, so it's on its way through. We could be in full production by the time we could set up a trial. So I believe we could have production up and running by the time we were able to get, let's say, IRB approval to set up a trial.
Can I ask you a question here?
Sure.
What's your biggest obstacle that you see here, and what would be your ideal partner?
It's a great question. I think, first of all, our first hurdle is, to prove, does this actually work and help IPF patients? And I think the direct answer to that is a clinical study. So I think organizing such a clinical study, working with the foundation and perhaps a network of clinical trial sites that you already have built would be a great help to us. So I think it's really all about, does it work? We know it works in COPD patients. Is it going to work in IPF patients? To what extent? Is it going to be a home run, a single, a double? That would be the first thing to know.
So who's the partner that you would like here?
So a partner could be the network of clinical sites that you've built to do clinical trials. That would be, let's say, for the device side. For a drug delivery trial, which is, I think, a second shot on goal, for that we need a drug partner. And I think the ideal would be a partner that's already got a formulation that's designed to be inhaled. For us would be the easiest and the fastest trial to get up and running. If there were other formulations, whether they're antifibrotics or mucolytics or what have you, and they were designed for an IV injection or oral, they'd have to be reformulated. So I think our best partner is a drug company that is already working on an inhaled, if we want to do drug delivery, and or just working straight with the clinical trial sites if we want to do just a device alone trial.
Great. Let's take our last question from Greg.
Wonderful and really interesting technology. I sensed in the beginning maybe more exuberant emphasis on IPF with the technology, but your more recent comments really kind of clarified it for me. And that's because, at least in pulmonary fibrosis caused by IPF, airway limitation is not a major issue. There's actually supranormal flows, and closure isn't necessarily a problem like it is with patients with more established COPD/emphysema. And so I'm trying to understand it in IPF, in contrast to RA or hypersensitivity, where there are significant airway abnormalities and mimic COPD. Where would you see the application of this product from a clinical standpoint, as you described it very well in COPD?
Sure.
So
I want to go back.
Understand.
Perhaps I want to go back to this slide here and just point out a couple of things. So first of all, I think as far, again, we're new to IPF. So everything I know about IPF, I learned from helpful people in the last 6 to 8 weeks or so. We've looked at IPF for a long time, but felt we didn't really have a way in to work easily with the community until we were selected for the challenge. So we're very thankful for that. When we started looking at small airways and IPF, first thing we found is that it was talked about a lot in the 70s and wasn't talked about at all. And recently in the Lancet, somebody published something again saying it is a factor. I blew up this little section here. This is from an article by the group in Colorado. looking at, of course, the mucus, and you can see here, there is kind of a narrowing. So this isn't a arrowy narrowing all the way down the tree. This is kind of looks like a last mile problem. But from our perspective, anything that's impeding is not helping oxygen and gas exchange. So to the extent also that a narrowed airway increases, if it's narrowed by mucus or what have you, increases the pull of the surface tension and tends to want to reclose that, which you hear on breathing with crackles and things like that. We think this can help. I'll say it's not a 100% shot that this is going to work for the differences that you described, but we think it's a very low risk potential to help in some way, and it's adjunctive to whatever else is going on with pharmacotherapy. And so really it's a low cost, high return potential shot.
Yeah, I would agree that it remains exploratory in IPF, but much more grounded in clinical care and evidence in COPD.
Yeah, and we would love to explore it. That's why we're here.
Perfect, thank you. Before we start, definitely want to thank Matter and the Three Lakes Foundation for including us today. My name is Morgan Clyburn. I am co-founder and CEO of Agitated Solutions. We are a startup based out of Oakdale, Minnesota. I'm joined today by Dr. Stephen Ruas, and I'll let him introduce himself and kick us off.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for allowing the time. I am the clinical chief of pulmonary critical care medicine here at Stanford University, and as part of my activities, am quite heavily involved in critical care management, including patients with respiratory failure, which of course brings us here to talk about pulmonary fibrosis. If you could move us to the next slide. As is unfortunately painfully aware to the PF Foundation and we involved in patient care, pulmonary fibrosis is and can be a very limiting and mortal circumstance. As this slide demonstrates, the progression can be substantial and rapid, and oftentimes involves hospitalizations. As the center panel on this slide reveals, within a 12-month period, pulmonary fibrosis patients have a substantial risk of hospitalization. And as this slide reveals, that hospitalization may reveal or may involve a great risk for ventilatory support, either non-invasive, as in using BiPAP, or invasive with mechanical ventilation. And as the right-hand portion of this slide reveals, the circumstance of mechanical ventilation in IPF patients is associated with substantial mortality. The support for these patients is historically, as the next slide reveals, a circumstance of mechanical ventilation. And while mechanical ventilation is very useful, it is fraught with problems and limitations. As this slide notes, mortality rates are high on mechanical ventilation. The circumstance specifically in IPF is one of difficulty in ventilation, hugely owing to the stiffness or lack of compliance of these lungs, necessitating ventilation circumstances that can, in part because of the ventilation, add injury to patients with already injured lungs, which is a big issue, which I'll address momentarily. Continuous sedation is often needed given the circumstances of mechanical ventilation, and the implicit circumstance is one of protracted ICU stays. As the next slide reveals, there are options for additional therapy. This comes in the form of what we know as ECMO, the acronym standing for extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, which, as the center figure in this slide reveals, is a expensive and rather sophisticated piece of externalized circuit that has the advantage of being able to provide oxygen support and loading and clear CO2 from a patient with respiratory failure in whom mechanical ventilation has failed. There are notable disadvantages. It is an externalized circuit. It involves large caliber venous access cannulae, The circumstance includes vascular thrombosis risks, coagulation cascade risks, and blood cell lysis risks, given that the blood is run through a circuit outside the body. It's expensive. So while we imagine that this therapy is good for support of patients, including pulmonary fibrosis patients who might ultimately be able to recover or would be candidates for lung transplantation, it is problematic. And I'll let Morgan take over from here with what we hope to develop as an alternative.
Great, thank you, Dr. Rouse. So our solution we are terming ICMO, so intracorporeal membrane oxygenation. And put simply, what we're trying to do is provide the respiratory gas exchange that you would get with ECMO or ventilation without removing the blood from the body and without requiring the patient to be intubated. So we do this through a single central venous catheter that allows for delivery of oxygen into venous circulation while also removing carbon dioxide. So the impact of this solution is pretty meaningful. So first and foremost, because the patient isn't required to have intubation and we're not removing blood from the body itself, we believe this would be significantly less invasive than the current lung recovery and support options. And because of that, obviously would mitigate potential for adverse events. And if we can do both of those things, we believe this would allow for earlier intervention, driving better outcomes at a significantly lower cost. And from the patient perspective, as Dr. Rouse mentioned, both ECMO and intubation and mechanical ventilation often require the patient to be sedated throughout the course of therapy. And by providing a treatment option through a catheter in the leg, we believe the patient would be able to be awake as well as potentially more mobile. So overall, our system allows for safer treatment with greater flexibility. So we know that we are trying to accomplish a pretty challenging clinical feat. And so we've assembled a pretty impressive team to do so. So we have pretty diverse clinical expertise and perspective with leaders ranging from critical care to neurosurgery to cardiology, as well as medical device engineering veterans with experience in electromechanical systems and specifically with catheter-based solutions and innovations. And we're really excited to tackle this challenge. And with that, we will open it to any questions.
Thank you so much, Morgan. We're going to send the first question to Greg.
Really exciting. I'm trying to understand a little bit more of the technology, which may be beyond this very brief presentation. But is the technology changing O2 delivery by increasing partial pressure of oxygen and removing CO2, or is it modifying hemoglobin? Since O2 delivery is infinitely more impactful by hemoglobin concentration and saturation than it is partial pressure of oxygen.
Dr. Rouse, do you want to take this one?
Oh, it's a good question. And the answer here is the technology is working on delivering oxygen within the venous system by catheter-based technologies. It is not altering hemoglobin, though the implied question is indeed correct. One, certainly for veno-venous ECMO circuits, one wants to maintain an optimized hemoglobin, whatever that number might be. It's augmented for, exactly as you point out, O2 delivery.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm going to send our next question to Tara Lynn.
Yep. Hi, thank you for your presentation. My question to you is do you have any clinical outcomes data, or is this so far a hypothesis? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So first of all, we're pretty new. We formed the company in January of this year. At this point, we've been breaking down the problem into three main categories. So one of oxygen delivery, one of CO2 removal, and then the third is really the deployment system. And so at this moment in time, we've been doing benchtop testing. So a way to look at our ability to remove CO2 from both DI water as well as pig's blood. So it's all based off of benchtop testing at this point in time. We are working toward doing some preclinical work. As I'm sure the panel is well aware, doing a device of this nature does take a lot of time. And so we're pretty early in the engineering efforts at this point.
Thank you.
Terrific. Let's now turn to Ruth.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. So I think I have similar questions. So I understand the oxygen delivery component, but I'm really struggling with the CO2 removal because blood stays in the body. So could you say what your thoughts are there as a concept?
I'll take a stab and Steve chime in as needed, but basically our catheter system has a couple components of it. And the way to think about it is that we are decoupling oxygen delivery from CO2. So there's different mechanisms to do that. The CO2 specifically is actually using oxygen as a sweet gas with the CO2 permeable membrane. And then we're actually pulling a negative pressure out of the system as well to encourage the CO2 transfer into that catheter.
Thank you.
Great. Ruth, did you have any additional questions?
No, thank you.
Let's go to Dave.
Yeah, I had a question about the, I guess, the commercial model eventually, and I understand it's very early in the engineering phase. Is this something that would be more kind of like a med tech device, so sold, it's like a system or a platform sold to a hospital and then the physicians are trained on it?
That's right, yeah. And so basically the actual portion that would be not reusable is the catheter deployment itself. And so there's a catheter placed in each patient, and then there would be an external system that then is run that with that.
Gotcha.
And so in our case, yes, we would sell the system, and then we would have the catheter-based technology per patient.
And one more question, is the value prop that this is less invasive, more efficient, more efficacious, or is it also kind of a less of a capital cost compared to kind of the ECMO platform?
Yeah, so ECMO specifically is the 15th most expensive medical procedure we have, and the average cost is $550,000 per patient. So there's a couple things that go into that cost. The first is the high rate of complication. The second is the care setting in which it's delivered. So it's all in the ICU. And then because of the fact that they're removing blood from the body, they actually have to have continuous monitoring of those lines. And so if you think about what ECMO does, it takes blood out, it puts heparin in so that we aren't getting clotting. It then does the gas exchange, heats it, puts it through a pump and puts it back in the body. And so if we can remove all of those elements of potential issue, in theory, we could have this potentially given at a lower cost resource setting and with less continuous monitoring of the system itself. And so that's all just based off of the care around the equipment. But we also believe our system is in and of itself more simplistic and able to lower costs in that way as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for an excellent presentation. We are going to give our judges a few minutes to enter their scores and make some notes. And we're going to ask that the Auto2 company and team pull up their presentation.
I have one more question here.
Sure.
How attractive is this for the patient and the caregiver? It sounds pretty complicated. So how would you get the patient who's generally older and a caregiver, a daughter or wife or whatever, to understand this? Wouldn't this be a little complicated for them? And then what's your human requirement here as far as connection with the patient?
Yeah, and definitely it is complicated. It's a complicated technology. And I think that it would be presented as an option to be supportive for the lung while there's an acute exacerbation and or helping as a bridge if they're going to get a lung transplant, for example. But the biggest proposition to the patient itself is, of course, just efficacy with lower risk. But again, the advantage this would have versus other therapies such as ventilation and ECMO is that the patient actually is awake. And so if you're going to have a loved one in a critical care setting like this, being able to actually talk and talk back, as well as, being a little bit more mobile and less impacted by this therapy that's saving them, I think that's pretty meaningful for the patient as well.
This Stephen Ross, I'd add that in an analogous way, this would be a little more akin to having a patient on and having the appropriate discussions around a temporary venous dialysis catheter, which is a single catheter it is a lot less problematic for the patient than is the circumstance of being connected to an ECMO circuit. And the discussions thus would be around a simpler device, but as you point out, it still involves discussions around what the patient's desires and constraints might be in terms of accepting and being on advanced therapy for pulmonary fibrosis. It's a very relevant question with discussions needed between care providers and patients and family.
And Tom, this is Greg. I might just say, I think what is being suggested, this is not a at-home device.
Oh, no. No. It is not. It invites the options for a not full ICU delivery, but we're not proposing, and it would be miles away from a home device.
Good morning. We are Auto2, automated oxygen monitoring and dosing in real time. I'm Lisa Lancaster. I'm a professor of medicine at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, and I've directed the IPF and ILD program there for over 20 years now. I've witnessed firsthand the challenges and needs of patients requiring oxygen. I know what patients need, and I know what providers need. This concept was born out of recognition of that need. There are 200,000 patients in the US with IPF and 5 million worldwide. 1.5 million rely on supplemental oxygen daily. But oxygen therapy is antiquated. It really hasn't changed much for decades. There are problems with dosing, manual adjustment, and location. Oxygen is presently prescribed based on the patient's resting and walking needs in clinic, but those needs don't exactly predict the activities of daily living requirements for patients, and they can easily get underdosed in their oxygen with use at home. And that results in an increased risk of pulmonary hypertension. Well, that's high blood pressure in the pulmonary arteries that results in right heart failure, swelling of the belly, and swelling of the legs. Another problem is manual adjustment. Patients have to constantly turn up their oxygen when they're doing more and turn it down when they're doing less. And that happens multiple times a day. Think about how many times a day you stand up and walk and sit down, and how many times you would have to adjust your oxygen. We're essentially like cars. When we go faster, we need more gas. And that's a huge burden on the patient in that process. Stationary tanks are also usually located in the bedroom. So when the patient gets up and walks from the bedroom to the family room and then sits down, they need to turn up their oxygen when they walk and turn it down when they sit down. But now they're in the family room and their tank and their knob is back in the bedroom. So they've got to decide, do I turn my oxygen up and just leave it up all day as I'm walking around through my house, or do I underdose myself and leave it on the lower level and conserve oxygen? We don't think they need to have that question or problem. So we've developed this solution, the right flow at the right time. It's a network-enabled smart knob placed directly on the oxygen concentrator dials that provides real-time titration regulation and connects the patient's vitals and oxygen saturation to the algorithm, which then automates the tanks. So what are the features of the right flow system? Well, it's automated, it's a connected system, and it senses oxygen saturation in real time, feeds that to the algorithm, which is the key know-how of this device, and adjusts the flow rate according to the patient's need and maintains the appropriate oxygenation. It connects to industry standard oxygen concentrators and adaptable portable O2 concentrators. And that's key because that's a quick to market concept. It works with things that are presently used by patients. We believe that it would reduce oxygen waste by turning down the oxygen automatically and remove the hassle that patients have of constantly thinking of their oxygen. So here's our O2 concept platform, and that includes a patient wearable device that monitors blood oxygen saturation, heart rate, and activity level, and it feeds that into the Auto2 app and ultimately drives oxygen flow rate levels in real time via that right flow smart knob. Now, here's a key component of our device, and that's data monitoring. We can capture oxygen needs via saturation and flow rate and give that to the provider for use in telehealth visits and to monitor disease progression to as well and alert physicians or clinics when patients are requiring more oxygen. We don't have a tool right now that'll do that. So here's a picture of how we match up to our competitors. The key component of our device is an algorithm that understands the limitations of the wearables and it matches it with the physiology of patient with hypoxic respiratory failure. A key second feature is data monitoring for the provider. Now, these devices are early in their development that are out there now, but they are not presently being utilized by patients. I don't have any patients on these devices and neither do my colleagues. Our go-to-market strategy is one of product development with rigorous testing of the algorithm in real life for these patients. We want to validate methods for treatment and leverage the team members to perform clinical trials at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, Aldi Clinic, and with our partnering clinics and academic centers throughout the US. This is what I do. This is what I've done for 20 years in the clinical trial space. We want to develop partnerships with DMEs and oxygen companies as well. Our competitive edge is one that is smart, integrates the vitals with the application and the right flow of oxygen for the patients. And we want to make this easy to use as well. We don't want the patients having to worry about their oxygen like they are now. This is a patient-centered approach from conception through development. Auto O2 was born from clinical need and listening to patients' concerns. So you've seen the concept of our platform, and that's coupled with my clinical expertise in clinical trials program at Vanderbilt, where product development and testing can occur. We have a provisional patent application filed and are seeking connections to industry stakeholders and capital partnership opportunities to fuel the commercialization of this technology. Will you join us to make this a reality for patients? Thank you. And I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much. Our first question is going to go to Tara Lynn.
Hi there. First off, thank you so much for your presentation. My question to you is, what is the total addressable market? So of the customer, of the population base that needs, or that has IPF and needs oxygen devices, and what does that number look like? Thank you.
So really, this is a device that potentially could be utilized by anybody with chronic hypoxic respiratory failure. And as I noted on the first slide, that's about 1.5 million people in the US and much larger in the world. So this is not a device that's just limited to the use of patients with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis who greatly need this. The quality of life is lousy for people who require oxygen. And this is a chance to potentially make it better for them by improving dosing, but also taking their mind and worry off of this. So we've got a bigger market potential than we do just with IPF.
I have a question. This is an awfully good concept that you have. I lived with this. I know how important this is, how important the mobility is, especially with your concentrators. So my question is, why haven't you made more progress? Is this, you started on this, and what's your big obstacle here? Because this to me looks awfully good and awfully simple, and it gives the, it really helps the patient and the caregiver, enabling them to walk around and also to be absent from their homes.
Right, Tom, that's a great question. And essentially, as a provider, as a clinical trials researcher looking at new medicines in pulmonary fibrosis space, I've been sitting here waiting for a device to use for patients to be able to prescribe, to give it to them. And frankly, I just got impatient and just said, somebody needs to do something, and maybe that's me, and I need to step up to the plate and work and develop a device for this. So when the challenges came along, and I've been thinking about this concept over time, I've been able to work with Merge through the Medical Device Studio, and also have opportunities to work with Wondry 2, which is the Vanderbilt device development that have occurred. I just honestly said it's time for somebody to do something, and that somebody just might be me.
So what's your major problem here? What's your
So
main? You need a partner, I would presume, right? Who would work with
absolutely
you, provide the dollars involved. But
right. Absolutely. I'm a full-time clinician, but I am interested in partnering to make this product go to fruition. So I need funding to make that happen. I need good biomedical engineering, and mainly companies that are interested and have knowledge in this space to take it on to commercialization. So we can develop product and through merge or through Vanderbilt's resources, but I need that commercialization piece.
so do you have a budget or plan going forward if you can find the right partner? Have you done that?
Right. So finding the right. So that's through grants, and that this is one step to be able to have a chance or opportunity for that funding to put that prototype together and then test it in patients. That's what I'm rich in. I'm rich in patients. We see 4 to 10 new ILD patients a week. We have COPD clinics. We have all sorts of patients with chronic hypoxic respiratory failure that we can test a prototype in. So it's a matter of funding to put together the prototype and also partner with a company for further development and commercialization.
So assuming that you'd have that partner and the money, what would you see would be the delivery time here to deliver the device?
Right. So first step is going to be product development, and we imagine that coupled with testing would, if we want to pick a very aggressive timeline, would be over the first year, then regulatory work during the second year, and maybe aggressively at the end of the second year, be able to have a product out there for patients, maybe at the end of the fourth quarter of the second year, 2022, or the first part of that next year. I'm willing to work as hard and as fast on this as we can because, like you, I recognize need. Patients have waited long enough and nothing's been done in this space.
Yeah, this is exactly what is needed. Thank you. We'll talk later.
Thank you so much, Tom.
I'm going to pivot our next question to Ruth.
Yeah, thank you very much for a clear presentation. So my understanding first is that we're looking, value proposition is really adjusting the flow rate based on demand. So automating the flow rate. Is that, if that is correct, then I have specific questions. Is that correct in terms of the value proposition?
So that's part of it. So part of it is automated adjusting to take the patient out of the decision-making part of this. The other part is delivering the amount of oxygen they need to prevent complications. We don't really want to overdose. In the COPD world, we don't want to overdose because of CO2 retention. We don't want to overdose in other diseases too because of theoretic free radicals and other problems with hyperoxia. We don't want to underdose either because of the risk of pulmonary hypertension. So correct dosing is key. And if you look at the dosing, if you look at the trials that have been done with the competitor models, they're not quite there yet. They're having 20-25% of the time with people hypoxic with saturations less than 88%, where we would be titrating them up. So I think those are the two big elements. I'm going to add in a third, that's data monitoring for the physician to understand the oxygen needs with saturation and the flow rate so that we can capture disease progression. And I'm a value prop for this.
So maybe I can follow on with my other questions, but in the algorithm that you're conceptualizing here around adapting the flow rate and the dose, we don't want their oxygen saturation to change. So could you comment a little bit? So exercise is a big driver of change in oximetry measures. Does the algorithm consider multiple parameters in order to change that? Because you don't want hypoxemia, you want to get it well before patients get that.
So without giving too much away, it takes activity level parameters set by the physician. And that can be, I want the physician to have the ability to set that. I think there's some machines like CPAP where we don't have hands-on to be able to set. I think this needs to be easy enough for the provider to be able to adjust and set those parameters as well, because there may be unique needs depending on the disease that's causing hypoxic respiratory failure. And the fourth thing I want to say is I think oxygen therapy in general is underfunded by Medicare. We don't have data to understand the flow rates and oxygen needs of patients. We can capture that with this, improve the higher flow rates that are needed in patients who have interstitial lung disease, and their needs are much, much higher than patients with emphysema.
So hello, everyone. My name is Jessica, and I'm here today with my colleagues, Jonathan and Wilson, all three of us biomedical engineers by training. And we met through the Johns Hopkins University and have since spent the last 2.5 years investigating the pitfalls with portable oxygen equipment. And our team was founded on our intrinsic need to innovate with a purpose. And when we discovered just how limiting oxygen equipment can be for patients, we were deeply unsettled and knew that we had to do something about it. So with that, we founded Oxygen in order to bring a new generation of portable oxygen equipment to those who need it most. And when I say those who need it most, I mean the 1.6 million Americans who are currently underserved by their portable oxygen equipment. And oxygen therapy in the portable setting is mainly provided by oxygen tanks or portable oxygen concentrators known as POCs that are a small purse-like device that take in ambient air, concentrate the oxygen, and deliver pure oxygen to the patient. And while oxygen tanks can provide a range of oxygen flow rates, they are really heavy, bulky, and difficult to maneuver. And while POCs are the gold standard for portability, they are limited in the flow rates that they can provide and are restricted in battery life. And furthermore, both these types of equipment provide a constant output of oxygen, which doesn't adapt to the dynamic oxygen needs of patients. And these are challenges that we've heard time and time again through our extensive ethnographic research. So with over 1,000 patient surveys and interviews, we've identified 3 key insights. That flow rate limitation really is the #1 reason for not owning a POC. That 47% of patients have willingly and actively used a POC for its lifestyle benefits, while knowing that it did not meet their oxygen needs. And that 88% of patients really do want a self-adjusting device to help manage their dynamic oxygen needs during their daily activities. And to really understand what it means to live with oxygen, I'd like you to meet Margaret. Margaret is a collection of patient struggles and stories that we've gathered through our extensive discussions with patients and their families. And Margaret has been living with pulmonary fibrosis and requires 4 liters per minute of continuous oxygen. And Margaret has really enjoyed using her POC for its flexibility. The ease of portability, rechargeable batteries, and FAA compliance meant that she could travel to see her grandchildren and participate in family activities. And when back home, this also meant that she could do groceries, go to church, and run errands on her own terms. However, a recent increase in her oxygen needs leaves Margaret with a POC that is no longer sufficient in treating her hypoxemia. And this is because the output from POCs prevents many high-flow patients from using the device, therefore restricting them to oxygen tanks that limit independence and mobility. And this reduced mobility can lead to a vicious cycle of social isolation, depression, poor quality of life, and ultimately increased mortality. And Margaret is not alone. Unfortunately, this is the reality that many patients face. Projected are quotes that we've gathered from patients about what it's like to live with oxygen. The most heartbreaking of them all, I just want my life back. In order to help patients like Margaret, we've developed a proof of concept POC for high flow patients with longer lasting and personalized hypoxemia relief. So retrofitting a current POC, we've incorporated a patent pending flow modality of high flowing air with pulses of pure oxygen that utilize additional breathing mechanics compared to traditional oxygen therapy in order to really provide a more effective treatment overall. And we also incorporate automatic oxygen regulation by detecting the patient's blood oxygen levels in real time and adjusting oxygen output in order to provide more appropriate treatment while minimizing oxygen waste. And we believe that together, our unique flow modality and automated oxygen regulation can double the amount of time that can be spent outside of the home for high flow patients to really give them back the mobility and quality of life that they deserve while providing peace of mind that oxygen needs are being met. And while our solution can provide immediate impact for oxygen patients, we see further downstream opportunity in integrating into the patient's overall respiratory care journey. So we envision a real-time platform that can provide feedback on oxygen management to the patient and their clinical team, while also building an unprecedented set of outpatient oxygen data to ultimately create a framework for predictive trends that could be used to provide improved and personalized respiratory care. We have 2 ongoing clinical studies at the Johns Hopkins Hospital to validate the science behind our solution, and preliminary results suggest that the addition of high flow air is comfortable to patients, reduces dyspnea, and increases exercise capacity over standard oxygen therapy. Now, taking a look at the market, there are about 2.4 million patients who require oxygen therapy, out of which 1.6 million are considered to be ambulatory. So we plan to initially target the 300,000 patients who are currently restricted to using oxygen tanks, while ultimately all 1.6 million ambulatory users can benefit from our technology. And there are many players within the oxygen space. However, most companies such as Inogen and Aircept reside in the low flow portable setting or in the high flow stationary setting such as Vapotherm. So we would really be the first to provide a high flow portable solution with the potential to then branch out into the other quadrants. And we definitely would not have made it this far without our incredible team. Our core engineering team is composed of myself and my colleagues Jonathan and Wilson, between which we lead the execution of our solution. And we are supported by an amazing team of advisors from Johns Hopkins and industry, including translational experts, patient advocates, and clinical experts in the respiratory space who've really been extremely involved in making this project possible. And thanks to our team of leading experts, we've been able to raise to date over $360,000 to support our ongoing research efforts. And we hope to continue that momentum today as we pitch to you for $50,000 to support design for manufacturing, ongoing intellectual property expenses, as well as team salary as we aim to get to market. And with that, we hope to bring 1.6 million patients improved oxygen equipment.
Terrific. We're gonna send the first question to Greg.
Wonderful presentation. It's great to see not only the technologies advanced, but its application and validation through a large number of the studies that you have initiated confirm the intuitive importance. I guess to clarify, since you key in on the ambulatory nature, and Mr. Hervis mentioned how important that is, this technology could piggyback onto ambulatory POCs to extend their capacity and appropriately allow for oxygenation. Is that an appropriate interpretation of your presentation?
Yes, of course. And John, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so in terms of piggybacking, our goal is not to be like a modification or an add-on device that would go on existing POCs. That's been our current prototyping approach, but in the long run, yes, we would envision ourselves being a type of POC that has this system for improved efficiency and saturation.
So okay, so that's important. So this is an independent device, not an adapter.
Yes.
Okay.
So what do you see as a limitation on the amount of hours or the amount of time outside of the home here? Because you had mentioned twice, 2 times the normal high flow today, but is this something that you could see going 5 or 6 hours?
So I think so. That's our hope. Based on previous research done with closed loop ambulatory oxygen systems, we do believe there's a large potential for oxygen savings and subsequently in the portable oxygen concentrator battery savings. And then the purpose of our current ongoing scientific validation studies is to see essentially how much oxygen we can save with the addition of this high flow airstream as well, which would save in turn more battery life. I'm not sure that I can propose that it would be 5 hours, but our goal really is to extend the battery life through a reduction in energetic costs associated with the production of oxygen.
So this is based on technology then in the battery area.
No, so it's not the innovation is not related to battery technology at all. It's actually related to first adjusting the oxygen output so that it is exactly what the patient needs in real time, minimizing potential waste. And secondly, the mixed flow air that we're speaking of is designed to potentially increase the efficiency of the existing oxygen through the addition of the high flow airstream. So it's not related to the battery technology, it's more related to accurately matching the output of the device to the patient's needs, and then the study of this additional flow modality, which may carry additional benefit.
What's your major, and then I'll finish, what's your major obstacle here as you see it to commercializing this and getting this out available?
So I guess I can, on the closed loop front, I think the biggest obstacle we've seen is a patient satisfactory, continuously wearable pulse oximeter. So current pulse oximeter embodiments don't lend themselves well to continuous wear for the patient. And so in the context of an automatically adjusting device, that's going to be a very important design consideration. And secondly, we're still in the process of validating the value propositions behind the mixed flow, the addition of the air that we're talking about. So until we have a true sense of what that the benefit that can really bring and have a quantification of that, I think that is also a potential hurdle. I don't know if Jess, you want to expand on that?
No, that sounds good, John.
Great. We're going to take our next question from Ruth.
Thank you. So this definitely addresses a major need. So I had a few questions, and I think battery was mentioned, but to me, the compressor size and the weight, because weight has been a key issue in terms of innovation in that space. Could you comment about what this would weigh? Because for high flow rate, you need to have a significant amount of power.
So our goal, we haven't yet built a complete device from the ground up. Our goal is that we would maintain a weight profile similar to the current sort of heavier end of the devices, the 9 to 10 pound portable oxygen concentrators. But I don't have an exact number, but that's the target range, and anything above that we would really consider unsatisfactory.
Thank you. And could you comment on the flow rate that you're targeting?
Sure. So we're not increasing necessarily the flow rate of oxygen that's coming out of the device, right? We're adding the stream of high flow air. And so our hope is that we would be able to satisfy patients who currently require between 3 to 5 liters per minute of oxygen and can't currently use those devices. But again, that's a hypothesis that we're currently evaluating through our ongoing studies. The net oxygen output of the device would be similar to current devices.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take our next question from Dave.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I guess my question was around mechanism of action. So it's, you kind of teed up the problem, you addressed the problem at the beginning of someone needing 4 liters per minute, but current portable platforms only deliver 3. You're not necessarily increasing the amount of oxygen, you're using like a burst to like run rich, use the high airflow, and then kind of taper it back. So the output's similar, but the result is hypothesized to be better because of the burst technology?
Yes, so there is some pre-existing research into just the delivery of high flow air alone, and it showed that it did have respiratory benefits on top of just the delivery of pure oxygen. And subsequently that if you delivered high flow air and oxygen to a hypoxemic patient, that you would get a slight reduction in oxygen demand through the delivery of the high flow air, but that was not studied in depth. And so our studies are essentially teasing out what that savings could be with different flow patterns and, as you described, burst modalities essentially. So yes, yeah, I guess.
Got it. And one more question: would like Inogen or a competitor be able to like kind of quickly incorporate the burst or high airflow technology as well, or is it something that's very difficult to reverse engineer?
So from a engineering perspective, I don't believe it would be too challenging. We have filed for intellectual property protection on the concept, and so that is where we hope to construct the difficulty. But if, for example, through the lens of a partnership, no, it would not be particularly challenging for them to modify their devices to do this.
Great. Thank you very much to everyone from Matter and for 3 Lakes for having me. It's really a privilege to be here today. So I'm going to present my proposal to use collagen-targeted PET imaging to help advance pulmonary fibrosis. So I am a clinician at Massachusetts General Hospital, and I specialize in the care of patients with pulmonary fibrosis. And in taking care of these patients over the past several years, there are several unmet needs that I think that are urgent, pressing issues. One is that within this field of pulmonary fibrosis, while it's an overall progressive disease, there's considerable disease heterogeneity, and this results in difficulty for providers in providing accurate prognostication for an individual, and also results in delays in diagnosis, especially in early disease. While we do have available treatments, our current treatments only slow disease progression. They're very costly and have frequent side effects. And determining response for an individual, especially given the overall progressive nature of the disease, is nearly impossible. New treatments are urgently needed. However, barriers include cost and prolonged trial duration, as well as difficulty determining treatment response. And this is important because time is long. So our current methods of monitoring, including CT and pulmonary function, measure the end result of scarring and inform us disease progression, but they do so over time. They really provide limited information at all as to disease activity at any one measure. And it's my belief that a disease activity measure for pulmonary fibrosis would have profound impacts on clinical care and clinical trials. First, in terms of patients, it can improve our ability to provide tailored care for a patient in terms of prognostication and treatment plans, and also help us to advance clinical trials by enabling such things as cohort enrichments, as well as early detection of treatment response. So to meet these unmet needs, I'm proposing to use collagen-targeted PET imaging as a way to advance patient care and clinical trial design. So PET imaging is a very promising and effective biomedical methodology whereby you can pair an imaging technique with the targeted molecular probe to be able to obtain information as to what is going on in a tissue non-invasively. And PET imaging is used commonly in the field of oncology in terms of diagnosis and looking at disease response. And here I'm proposing to use collagen-targeted PET to be able to detect disease activity and be able to determine more in terms of who has active disease and what's apparent on a CAT scan. Be able to use it for a cohort enrichment strategy such that patients that have high disease activity can be rolled preferentially into clinical trials, and that results in a lower number of patients that needed to be enrolled, as well as enriches for a population that's most likely going to meet the endpoint. And also early detection of treatment response. So the end goal of treatment is to slow down and hopefully eventually halt or reverse collagen formation. So if we can use a targeted molecular probe towards collagen, then that gives us a good chance of being able to detect treatment early, such that patients are not maintained on ineffective treatments that are only causing them side effects. And then for those patients at whom a treatment is effective, we're able to determine that with good confidence. So accumulation of type 1 collagen is really the hallmark of fibrosis. And gallium CVP8 is a PET probe that binds type 1 collagen with high specificity. In animal models, it's been shown to be able to stage disease as well as detect treatment response to an antifibrotic therapy. And what's really interesting about this probe is that we have preclinical data to suggest that this probe preferentially binds freshly synthesized as opposed to mature collagen. Thus, it might be an ideal imaging marker of disease activity. We have performed collagen-targeted PET imaging in 20 participants to date, the majority of whom have idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, and this probe is well tolerated with no unanticipated adverse events. And what I'd like to show you all here, these are dynamic PET images over time in a healthy volunteer. And you can see in the lungs, there's minimal at all background uptake. So this is helpful in thinking about how we can use this as a probe to detect pathology in the lung. And here I'm showing you an image of a healthy volunteer and a patient with IPF. So in the healthy volunteer, you can see that the lungs themselves are minimally enhanced. There's bright signal here in the main blood vessel going down from the heart, and there's signal in the liver. But if we compare it to the patient with IPF, you can see the whole lung, there's kind of a heterogeneous uptake. And then there's also these areas that are markedly bright. Some of these areas occur in areas of fibrosis. However, what's most interesting is that, as noted in the white areas, some of these, what I call hotspots, occur in regions of the lung that are, quote, normal on CT. So this suggests, in combination with our preclinical data suggesting we're sensitive to binding recent collagen, that we might be detecting disease activity before you see structural damage on CT. And if that's the case, this is a game changer in terms of taking care of patients and thinking about applications to early disease. So what is the feasibility of our large gel translation? I say is excellent. We have an active IND, we have a patent. Our measures are easily performed. And the nice thing about PET measurements is they're standardized. We have preliminary data that should show our measurements over a short time frame are highly repeatable. Gallium, the radio tracer, is readily available. And this PET probe can be paired with any available PET scanner, which are commonly found across the country and across the world. And while PET is expensive, it could conceivably be a cost-effective method, especially if you use this to identify a patient that is not receiving any benefit from an antifibrotic therapy that's $80,000 a year.
We're at time.
Okay. Should I stop here?
Yeah, finish the last two.
Okay, and most important, the burden to patient is minimal because this can be performed with free breathing, and the time from injection to completion is less than 2 hours.
Thank you so much. Let's go to our questions. The first question I'm going to ask of Tara Lynn.
Hi there. Thank you for your presentation. My question to the group is, how much impact does early detection have on outcomes?
Well, that is a great question. I think what we're learning more, and some of this is being done for work at Vanderbilt, at work at Brigham, is that early detection, going as early as interstitial lung abnormalities, carries a risk of mortality in and of itself. And what we do know is, as a whole, interstitial abnormalities, while they carry a risk of mortality, not everyone is going to progress. So I think in one of the holy grails in terms of early targeting disease is try to determine for those patients that have very subtle findings for which they might be diagnosed as maybe having some scarring at the basis of that's inconsequential. Could you pair it with a technique like this to be able to see collagen deposition where you can't on CT, and then be able to determine, is this someone who would benefit from earlier targeting of therapy?
Excellent.
Thank you.
We're going to ask our next question to Ruth.
Thank you. Very clear presentation. Thank you very much. So my question in terms of scalability and adapting it to clinical practice, could you talk a little bit about analytical pipeline, or how would you normalize it for different scanners in terms of how we apply it if we were to apply it in clinical practice?
Yeah, no, exactly. So that's one thing we're working on. So, one thing about PET measurements is that the standard uptake values are standardized across scanners, but we do need to validate that. So right now we have a project in place to do an early phase clinical trial at 3 different centers. It's primarily a trial is to investigate a new IPF therapy, but part of that is to be able to validate this technique and this measurement across scanners, as well as its ability to perhaps detect a change with treatment. So what the next steps would be, because we have the precursor of this probe, it would be transferring that to several different institutions to start, just to make sure that the measures we're finding can be validated across centers. And then we have developed a pipeline for analysis in terms of lung imaging that we could easily expand in terms of the number of centers. And then one thing I have to say is that the kind of the radiochemistry in terms of binding the PET tracer to gallium is relatively simple. So the burdens or the steps to implementation are actually not high.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to now turn to Greg.
Really wonderful presentation, and exciting to see the ability to perhaps identify earlier disease rather than established disease that we've been struggling with. May reflect my lack of understanding, but there's challenge with quantification on high resolution CT or CTs in general. is the ability to quantify changes over time easier or more challenging with PET imaging in the technique that you're trying to explore?
That is a good question. I think one difference to, let's say, CT versus what we're doing here is that CT is picking up actual structural deposition, so then that's going to be persistent and then increasing. And what we think about this probe is we think we're sensitive to recent collagen deposition. And I think that what we'll see over time is hopefully that the kind of perhaps the collagen uptake over the whole lung might be reduced as opposed to falling one area over time, because we're not necessarily staging disease. And some people ask, why do we think we're sensitive to early collagen, which really is what would set this probe apart. It's because the affinity for the probe to bind collagen is moderate at best. So it's going to be enriched to bind in states in which collagen deposition is highest. And then as collagen is made and cross-linked and becomes more mature, there are less binding sites available. And so what we have seen in some of the patients we've scanned is those patients that have disease progression, we're seeing disease progression occurring in areas of the lung that are we would call hot, with minimal uptake in parts of the lung that has established disease for several years.
You can imagine, I forget what you said, Holy Grail, but we could then perhaps target active disease rather than established disease.
Right. And I think this is an example of a technique that is complementary to our current techniques, because we don't want to replace CT because it's so helpful in terms of phenotyping, and we don't want to replace pulmonary function tests, but can we use this as a way to provide added information? And I'll say that in terms of the recruiting, we've had great interest from patients because this makes sense. This makes sense as a way to be able to see how much scarring is in the lung. And this is a huge problem and frustration both to a provider like myself and to a patient trying to determine how active one's disease is. And so hopefully you can perhaps allay concerns for people that have a low risk of progression. And for those people who have a high risk, you can tailor their care accordingly.
Right. I would like to start by thanking Matter. Brilliant sessions, a lot of mentorship and insights. I'm Girish Srinivasan, co-founder and CTO of Phenomics. I have with me my data science experts, Gautam and Nikita. We present PhenoChest IPF, an AI-assisted decision support plugin solution for the referral system. So approved antifibrotic drugs for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis do exist in the market today, but significant challenges still remain in accurate and timely diagnosis. So a high percentage of patients get misdiagnosed during early stages, and this leads to average IPF diagnosis time of over 2 years. The utilization of imaging across the diagnostic timeline is quite high, as you can see here. But the referral times are still long, such as going from X-ray to CT, for example. So our solution helps early identification of signals from X-rays, reduce time for CT referrals, creates an upstream biomarker for triage, and performs quantitative CT analysis for diagnostic assist. Through our interaction with an IPF patient, we learned how it took over 3 years to arrive at a diagnosis. And even at that stage, there was unfortunately no clear communications. He indicated it would have been really nice to know what the radiologist or pulmonologist meant when they said, looks like it's getting worse after reviewing the CT. On the care provider side, pulmonologists indicated the existence of systemic issues and loss of information resulting in referral delays leading up to about 1.5 years. So traditionally, imaging workflow has been qualitative in nature. The outcome and value of imaging heavily depends on the technologist's familiarity with the protocol, radiologist's experience in reading the images and dictating outcomes, clinicians' ability to interpret the radiological findings. So what if we can actually derive more value from images, add quantitative information, improve the explainability, and create biomarkers? That's exactly what Phenomics is providing. The general architecture of the solution is designed such that it does not disrupt the traditional workflow. Images can seamlessly be transferred to processing engines where our AI algorithms quantify anatomical structures and detect abnormality patterns. This information is in near real time sent to radiologists and referring clinicians during their image assessment as decision assist. So PhenoChest is our lung evaluation solution. This is basically an AI-assisted image analysis tool. It consists of an X-ray assessment engine that can detect and determine probability of various radiographic findings. It produces heat maps, calculates lung area, and assists in high-level triage. And our CT assessment engine precisely computes the lung and lobe regions, detects different patterns associated with the pathologies, and assists in pattern classifications. So let's take a look at an example use case here. A standard radiographic X-ray report qualitatively describes the findings and the impressions, such as what you see here, large right opacities. In comparison, the PhenoChest solution identifies different findings along with the extent and probability of their presence. While findings such as lung opacity or effusion in this case may be easily identifiable, the algorithm is able to pick up subtle findings that may often be missed. Additionally, an intelligence layer can further assist in high-level triage, such as between obstructive and restrictive disease in the case of ILD. This can really help in accelerating referral to high-resolution CT for deeper assessment. So for CT, the data has, although it's got a lot of information, standard reports are still qualitative in nature. Creating quantifications require deep expertise and significant manual efforts. So PhenoChest CT engine in near real time creates quantitative 3D representations. Specific patterns such as ground glass, honeycombing, etc., are precisely identified across each lobe. And from these patterns, classifications can be determined. So UIP, probable UIP, indeterminate UIP, or alternative differential diagnosis can be determined in the case of IPF. So we are able to do this because we have a diverse, capable, and really strong team to deliver on the solution. And our AI algorithms, technology, and workflow have already been validated in a COVID-19 related pulmonary assessment through our field deployment at a leading South Korean hospital. With the support of facilitators of this innovation challenge, we can bring PhenoChest IPF for pilot testing by April of 2021. Our specific ask from a winning outcome will include collaboration for X-ray and CT data to create our classification models, pilot site partnership to evaluate our complete solution, and regulatory process and reimbursement guidance to bring this commercially to the market. With that, I would like to seek partnership to help mitigate the challenge in accurate and timely diagnosis of IPF. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Let's take our first question to Dave.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the presentation. I guess my question is on the value prop. Is the goal to apply this to a standard chest X-ray and kind of speed that time to HRCT quicker so that you can have more of a definitive diagnosis and therefore initiate treatment before patients progress and hopefully have better outcomes? Is that kind of what the whole kind of idea is?
Yes, absolutely. That is spot on. So there's two aspects here. One is exactly as what you mentioned. Can we derive more signals and more biomarkers out of X-rays that can be indicative at a PCP, a primary care, or a general practitioner level? Hopefully, with that information, they'll be able to drive and accelerate the referral to CT as appropriate and as it requires. And the second aspect is when the CT comes into picture, the quantitative outcomes and the quantitative information can serve as an augmentation to a radiologist or a pulmonologist assessment. Thereby, it will be more objective in nature rather than subjective in nature.
Gotcha. And one more question. Would this be kind of a companion tool? So as a radiologist is reviewing a scan, they would look at this in parallel, or is this only for, I guess, more difficult to discern cases, and this is kind of used as a check or a second view?
So no, it will serve as primarily a companion tool to radiologists or pulmonologists, but it can also, in situations of lack of expertise or remote resource or low resource settings, it can certainly assist in expediting the process of initial early reads.
Got it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, let's take our next question from Greg.
Yeah, very nice presentation. In addition to that safety gap, it seems to me it may facilitate those that have subclinical or mildly symptomatic abnormalities in that at-risk population, as the prior presenter had mentioned, maybe those with ILAs. And we do something similar, at least in lung cancer, where it's mandated that if you see a nodule that there's a protocol for subsequent evaluation. So this strikes me as, if implemented, it could facilitate the documentation of abnormalities and the necessitation for follow-up with whatever is suggested. I think there are some guidelines, but am I thinking about that in the right way?
Absolutely, Greg. I think that's exactly what the pathway indication is expected to be. Obviously, I think we would all like CT to be much more available and be the primary mode for going after this, because the information that we get from the CT is so much more. But practically speaking, the more we can derive and more we can sort of learn from X-ray, will just help move in that direction faster. So that's exactly the time. That's why the combination of the solution, where we provide both the X-ray engine and the CT engine together, makes that a more proposition.
And you might bypass that unnecessary non-high resolution CT and go directly to the right study.
Spot on, exactly. This was exactly one of our discussions with the radiologist and pulmonologist, where we said, do we really need that? And maybe the X-ray can assist at getting there and bypassing that step.
Okay, great.
Terrific. Tara Lynn, let's go to you.
Hi there. Thank you for the presentation. My question to the group is, how accurate are the AI algorithms in detecting IPF, and how would you approach false positives? Thank you.
What was the second question again?
And how would you approach false positives?
So I guess the more cliche or sort of straightforward answer would be basically throw more data at it. That's kind of where we are. So I think the more diverse and the more variety and the veracity and the difference in the data, the better the algorithm will perform. In our early testing, as in terms of the algorithm for not specifically for IPF, but for COVID-19 use cases, we were able to see up to 95% specificity in the CT and about 92% sensitivity with identifying infiltration outcomes in the COVID CT patterns. The algorithms that we've been designing have been thrown at sort of multiple sources of data. We do a lot of data augmentation and pre-processing to enhance the ability to mimic as much as closely as possible real-world settings. But in truly speaking, if you were talking about false positives and accuracy, it's how we curate the data and clean the data. So collaborating and working with a lot of the clinicians in order to make that happen and have the algorithms read and understand the true ground truths is where we can sort of improve that. And that's one of our asks and seek to get to that level from where we are.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. We have time for one more question, so I'm going to go to Ruth.
Thank you. So I have a technical question really that addresses applicability in your use cases. Did you normalize the scanners? Did you use phantoms? Because one of the key challenges in looking at imaging data over multiple centers and multiple devices is really normalizing them in order to build an algorithm. So could you comment in the use case? Did you standardize the scanners or use phantom?
Right. So I mean, so in our specific example pipeline, we were using data from a single center, so they had already been sort of normalized across. But additionally, in our algorithm and AI engine, we have a significant pre-processing pipeline that does bring all the data into a similar format and structure and construct, thereby eliminating a lot of the noises and outliers here. But that having said, there still exists a lot of dependency on the data variability. And we realized that if it's, for example, a portable scanner or a scanner where the protocol was not appropriately acquired, the algorithm does not perform appropriately. And this is where the more outlier use cases we provide, and then this is sort of a continuous learning process, and the model will continuously build on top of itself. As the data grows, we'll sort of be able to overcome the existence of non-normal data sets. That's realistically, that's what you have, but the algorithm will compensate for it.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Karthik Vardarajan, the Chief Product Officer for Visionary Health. Our company develops AI-powered tools to improve screening of lung diseases. So as we all know, IPF is a rapidly progressing disease with an average patient life expectancy of only 2 to 5 years. An accurate diagnosis requires specialist evaluation and a high-resolution CT scan. However, a primary care physician is a point of contact for virtually all patients. Most PCPs have limited experience with the disease and limited screening tools available to them. As a result, about 2/3 of IPF cases are misdiagnosed initially. And it can be almost 2 years before that patient goes on to see a specialist. So this significant delay is one of the main reasons for poor survival odds for these patients. So the challenge is, how do we shorten this time to referral? One of the most common tools used in the primary care setting is a chest X-ray. However, almost 50% of these X-rays are read by physicians alone without inputs from radiologists. Additionally, there's tremendous variability even amongst individual readers looking at the same exact image. This inconsistency can put patients on very different paths to diagnosis. For example, if you look at the experience of the patient on the top right, her doctor saw signs of cracked glass on the chest X-ray, but for whatever reason, she was offered no further explanation, no additional testing, no referral, or no diagnosis. Whereas for the male patient on the bottom right, his doctor saw something funky on the chest X-ray, as the patient describes it, prompting that doctor to send them to a pulmonologist, who then ordered a CT scan. So that patient ended up getting a diagnosis. Now, if we had a panel of radiologists available to read every single image, we could make sure that no obvious findings are missed and patients don't fall through the gaps. But of course, this is not feasible. So our solution is an AI-powered tool to ensure more reliable and more consistent screening of X-rays. The X1PF, which is part of our X1 suite of products, is an AI engine that scans every image coming into the PACS, which is the picture archiving system, and flags any cases with suspected findings of fibrosis for that physician to consider in parallel to their own independent interpretation of the image. And with this additional data point, the physician can be much more confident about referring a given patient to a specialist for additional evaluation or testing. The X1PF is a physician-facing tool where the flags of suspected findings are presented directly in the PACS workflow. So there's no alteration of the normal clinical workflow for that physician. Our X1 suite also screens for many other abnormalities with accuracies above 90%. These engines, sorry, let me go back one slide. These engines have been built with use of millions of images, which we have access from a number of our existing partners from hundreds of clinics worldwide. And we have an established business model for X1 suite of products, and the X1PF will become part of that. Early results specifically for our X1PF solution show that our AI can detect 20% more fibrosis cases with specificity comparable to radiologists. This will reduce the number of repeat visits to PCPs before they get referred to a specialist, and also enable more prompt referral of patients so that they can get a prompt diagnosis. We are now planning for clinical validation to do additional external validation to compare our AI performance to humans, both relative to a panel of radiologists looking at the same images, as well as to the clinical ground truth. There are a few other competitors building chest X-ray solutions. However, we are the only ones offering a point of care application for use by the primary care physician to support their referral decisions. Additionally, the competitive products have not been validated in the IPF setting. In terms of the business model, we will be providing the X1PF free as part of our X1 suite of products to ensure wide access to patients and providers. Additionally, we will look to partner with pharma as well as payers. We believe that by ensuring timely referral, we can directly impact the patient pool eligible for treatment as well as the efficacy of these treatments. Additionally, by ensuring timely referral, we can reduce the incidence of acute events. These will be important considerations for our pharma and payers. We already have a number of partnerships in place, including partnership with 2 major picture archiving software vendors, which gives us access to thousands of users and hundreds of facilities, as well as the data, a very rich data source, which is what we used to build our X1 solution. We have also partnership agreements with urgent care clinics in the US, as well as a number of hospitals and imaging centers around the world who are ready to pilot our solutions as soon as we are done with our regulatory clearance. We have a very strong team in place to execute on this vision. So I'm responsible for our product and scientific strategy. I spent my past 10 years as a faculty of orthopedics at MGH, focusing on translation of device technologies to clinical use. Mustafa, who's on the call with me today, is our CEO and responsible for our business side of things. Jason is our chief medical officer and a practicing radiologist. Moritz, Matthias, Rahul, and Deepak head our AI and software efforts. Additionally, we have an experienced advisory board, which includes academic thought leaders, clinicians, and healthcare executives. I thank you for your attention, and we welcome any questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to take our first question from Greg.
Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. And so I understand it correctly. It seems like this technology would enable a more rapid evaluation of pulmonary fibrosis rather than defining an accurate diagnosis, because of the sensitivity is really at delineating and calling out the abnormalities that raise that concern for pulmonary fibrosis. Is that an appropriate interpretation?
Yeah, that is exactly correct. So the point is making sure that these patients who have any kind of suspect findings, it should trigger the appropriate referral for them so they can quickly get that definitive diagnosis from the specialist.
Okay.
And
okay.
I'll add to that real quick that the reason we're focused on this is 80% of why patients are not referred is not because they see a pathology and they misdiagnose it, but because they overlook the findings. So we make sure that the findings are apparent to initiate that referral.
If I could ask another question too, that we don't have standardized language for the description of pulmonary fibrosis. We're actually working on that and trying to implement it. But would it be that standardized approach to say these are abnormalities that warrant further evaluation would be included in a interpretation and a report, which somewhat binds the clinician to follow up on it? Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't interrupt.
How do you envision marketing this to the physician, to the primary care physician? How are you going to reach him with this offer?
So
go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead on that. So, we have an X1 suite of products that is specifically tailored to primary care physicians to decrease the number of overlooked findings and better help them manage their overread policy. And for our pulmonary fibrosis solution, that's going to be offered to those physicians for free. So it's not going to be any added cost to them. It'll simply be running in the background to ensure that they're not missing any pulmonary fibrosis cases. Now, we don't think it makes sense to charge the primary care physicians for this necessarily because as we know, pulmonary fibrosis is a very rare disease, and there might be sort of a lack of willingness to pay for something that may occur once, every here and there. So we're ensuring that this is running in the background, picking up these cases, and at the same time, not only are we still benefiting from them using the entire suite, but also we're looking to partner with pharma companies to help form that link between the patients to ensure more are detected earlier on and at higher volumes, and putting them on that right pathway to get the right therapies to ensure a better mortality rate.
Thank you. Thank you for answering Tom's question. Let's go now to Dave.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the presentation. I guess my question was kind of a follow-up on the business model. What do you anticipate or envision that partnership with pharma or payers looking like? Is that how you intend to monetize the platform?
Yes, exactly. We intend to monetize it that way. So by providing, either two ways, either education to the physician and the patient to help get them on the right pathway, and at the same time identify more of those patients for the pharma companies. So form that link to allow the pharma companies identify more patients in more geographies, whether it's in the US or abroad.
And how would Visionary, how would you monetize that link? Obviously would benefit, let's say, like a biopharma company, increased number of patients, more addressable patients. What is the revenue model for you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So our existing revenue model is for the entire suite. That's what we'd be currently charging for, and offering the pulmonary fibrosis as a free add-on. And then to additionally monetize that, which comes to your question, is we know that the data we extract out of it and identifying those patients is valuable to the pharma companies. So we wouldn't be laying off that data for free. We'd be having sort of a partnership or a payment plan for us to allow us to share that information with those pharma companies.
Thank you.
Terrific. Let's now go to Tara Lynn.
Hi there. Nice presentation, guys. And Dave, you took all the words right out of my mouth. So great questions. Luckily, I had a backup. My question to the group is, what type of data sets are you feeding into your AI algorithms?
Yeah, we have data sets, as Kartik mentioned, from hundreds of different facilities with, covering millions of scans from many different modalities. So it's a really diverse data set. And the data that we feed into it, we look at things like the radiology reports, the patient's history, and the symptoms that they're presenting. And then we're able to specifically tailor the AI algorithm to detect pulmonary fibrosis. And we do that iteratively to ensure that we're getting higher performances. And as Kartik mentioned, that's already allowed us to have a 20% higher sensitivity than radiologists currently. And we're looking to continue to move that forward and evaluate how much sooner can we be detecting these subtle signs to ensure early diagnosis.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, and I see that Ruth has unmuted herself. So Ruth, let's go ahead and have you ask that.
Thank you. A lot of my questions have been answered, but those 3 million scans that you have, how many of them are chest x-rays? And in addition to looking at fibrosis, did you look at lung nodules or emphysema, or what have you done with those 3 million?
Yep. So the 3 million are all chest X-rays actually, and they cover all the different variety of diseases, whether it's effusion, pneumothorax, nodules, as you mentioned, and fibrosis. So we curate the data and we structure it to be able to build different AI algorithms tailored to each individual abnormalities or set of abnormalities to ensure that we detect that with a high accuracy. And maybe to add to that a little bit, we already have a functioning product that we're pushing through the FDA and CE mark right now. That's a more holistic approach to help identify all these different abnormalities. And our goal here is to have a supplemental product with pulmonary fibrosis, specifically identifying it for referral.
So you feel that you're ready with lung nodules and emphysema, or is that where?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah, that product is done and validated, and we're going through the regulatory approval process now.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up quick question for you. You said that you were selling this with your total suite to physicians, but are you reaching physicians who don't have your total suite? Are you trying to do that, or no?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are obviously looking to expand our customer base, whether it's through our suite or specifically for locations or facilities where there's a higher likelihood of pulmonary fibrosis patients coming through. So this is not, intended solely for the suite as well, but we are looking to expand that base.
How are you reaching? Are you reaching that through direct mail or text, or how are you doing that?
So we're doing it, in two ways. The hard way, and this was, I guess, initially pre-COVID, is conferences and developing those relationships. But also the other way is through our partnerships. So there are radiology software providers that are embedded in thousands of facilities already, and we already have 2 of those partnerships. So that gives us instant access to those facilities and a direct relationship with those customers to sell them on the products we're developing.
Great, thank you.
For joining us, Three Lakes Foundation, Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation, and Matter for the announcement of the 2020 Pulmonary Fibrosis Innovation Challenge winners. Matter, it's been an honor for us to work with Three Lakes Foundation. We love working on programs like this, and in particular with people who are so passionate and so committed about making change in such an important area. And so it's really been a pleasure for us over these months and really over these years as we've worked with Three Lakes in its different incarnations, but especially most recently. So as I mentioned yesterday, as part of this program, we received applications from all over the world, from 10 countries, 30 different cities, and the dozen teams, so you, were selected obviously at the finalists. As the finalists, you've spent 7 weeks working with us to help propel and refine your solutions. So I'm excited to announce the awards. Before I do that, I want to just thank again the organizations and people who've really made this possible. Special thanks to the Three Lakes Foundation for the vision and leadership, and to the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation for all of your support. Our judges who dedicated a considerable amount of time and brain power to evaluating the solutions. So Dr. Greg Cosgrove, David Peterson, Dr. Ruth Talsinger, and Teralyn Romero, thank you very much for your help. Thanks to a number of our partners in this endeavor, so AbbVie, Cigna, the COPD Foundation, DoTank, Horizon Therapeutics, Northwell Health, NICRA, Pulsinelli, and White Oak Communications. Hopefully I didn't forget anyone. And then a few individuals who've really played key roles through this process. Dr. Tracy Luckhart from the University of Alabama, Dr. Max Cohen from University of California, San Francisco, David Lynch from National Jewish Health, Stephanie Golden, Mary Luz Fuentes, and Ed Ravalsky. So before I announce the winners, I'd like to ask Larry Shore, who's a Venture Acceleration Fellow at Matter, and who has been an incredible mentor for this program, to say a few words.
Thanks, Steve, and thank you all. It's been a rare privilege to work with each of you and watch your growth and your initiative over the past 5.5 months. In my view, you're all challengers, and regardless of the outcome of today's proceedings, every one of you should be proud of your work. I hope you'll come to learn and believe what I believe. And I'll share with you one of my favorite quotes, which I'm going to paraphrase here and update with a bit more of a modern pronoun. Some of you may be familiar with this. It's not the critic who counts, The credit belongs to you, the man or woman who is actually in the arena, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming, who spends him or herself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he or she fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that their place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Teddy Roosevelt, April 10th, 1923. It's a famous speech. It's one of my most inspiring speeches. It's kind of an homage to the entrepreneur, and all of you should be very proud of your efforts today and over the past several months. I wish you all very good luck in your future endeavors. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks so much for your help throughout this whole process. So yesterday's jury was really impressed with all of the solutions, had extended conversations in order to select the winners. And as Larry said, you should all be proud of what you've built. And you're probably also like, please get on with it. So let's get on with it to the awards. So we're going to announce 4 awards. So we'll start with the People's Choice Award. This team will receive $10,000 and bragging rights as the audience favorite. So Larry aptly called this company the Swiss Army knife of solutions. Please congratulate Adar Health. Virtual applause.
So much, guys. Really appreciate it. This is awesome. I mean, I think, as you said, like it's a nice bragging rights for us to say like people voted for us, which is fantastic. Thank you again. I don't know if I'll probably stop and maybe I'll talk later. The other ones if I want to jump in. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks so much and congratulations. All right, in third place, receiving $20,000 is a solution that the judges believe can really help primary care physicians make decisions and more quickly identify potential pulmonary fibrosis patients. So let's hear it for RecoverX.
Speaking on behalf of our team, I really want to thank Matter, TLF, the PF Challenge. This has been a really helpful process for us. We've really appreciated all the feedback, and we look forward to working with everyone moving forwards. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you and congratulations. Second place, receiving $30,000. Is a solution the judges felt was based on particularly strong science with the potential to disrupt the way diagnostics for pulmonary fibrosis are administered. Please join me in congratulating Collagen Targeted PET Scan.
Cool. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. And I just really appreciate the fact that you're believing in this technology, and we're really hopeful that we can use this to really make a difference for those with established disease, and especially identifying those with early disease so we can try to prevent these complications. You can probably hear my dog in the background. She's very enthusiastic.
She should be very excited as well, so congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, finally, the first place winner. So this team will receive $50,000 and a 1-year membership to Matter. This solution addresses an unmet patient need in oxygen delivery, and everyone who worked with this team was impressed with their passion for making a difference, their willingness to learn, and the potential of their solution to really change lives. Please congratulate Oxygen. And if the team wants to say a few words, Jessica or
Oh, sure.
Jonathan,
Thank you so much. I'm a little lost for words. This has been a really great and extremely insightful journey for us, and we're really excited to really use this money to propel us forward and get to the next steps in the solution and really impacting patients' lives.
congratulations on winning the first place. Congratulations to all of the winners, and again, all of the companies. And you put a lot of work into this, and all of your solutions are destined for making a significant difference in the lives of people with pulmonary fibrosis. So, you know, again, it was I was not one of the judges, but the judges spent a lot of time digging into each of the companies, and were really impressed with all the solutions. So I want to invite Tom Herbis and Dana Ball from Three Lakes Foundation to share a few words and close out this program.
Hi, Stephen, this is Dana. I'm not sure. Tom is remote, so I'm waiting to see if he chimes in. I don't think he will, so I'm going to get started, and if he does, we'll welcome his comments. So Tom called me right before this presentation. He wanted to make sure and share his apologies that he can't join, or probably won't be able to join, but we'll see. But most importantly, he wanted to share his thanks to everyone involved, to the team that made this challenge happen, to all the applicants from around the globe that participated, and he wanted to share to everyone that wasn't a winner today, never give up. You know, this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. And as we tried to capture yesterday, he wanted to share his words of wisdom, hope, and opportunity, because again, this is just the beginning. For Three Lakes Foundation, first, congratulations to the winners. I know that everyone worked really, really hard. It's exciting to be to this point, and again, really want to celebrate the winners. But we also want to celebrate everyone else. And most importantly, share with you, from our perspective, there are no losers. Today, there are non-winners. But when we started this, we had a few goals. First, we wanted to create additional awareness of pulmonary fibrosis, the challenges of living with it, and the needs of our patient communities. And through the work with Matter and our PR agency, CRISP, I think we can check that box. I think we have elevated awareness, we have been in the news, you have all told your stories, and we will continue to tell the stories of this challenge, the events and the participants' solutions after today. Two, we wanted to identify novel solutions, and we have a lot of novel solutions. In fact, we have so many incredible solutions that we want to follow up and continue this dialogue with people that have participated in this year's challenge. It's exciting to see the solutions that are very tactical, that are going to potentially help patients and caregivers and physicians today, while we see the amazing work of novel new therapies, drugs, and potential progress towards a cure over time. The third goal of the challenge was to develop a global community of innovators, entrepreneurs, and solvers to a myriad of challenges that we face in our PF community faces. And so, you know, after the challenge, we are organizing an alumni for this year's challenge. We want to continue to develop relationships with everyone that participated. So I want to leave you with this thought. This is not the end. This is rather just the jumping off place for future opportunities to work with you. And we want to celebrate, again, everyone that participated in this challenge. Thank you all, and wish you all the best of luck in tomorrow's work, and all the best as we head into the holiday season.
Thanks so much, Dana, and Tom, if you're on, and again, you know, we, from Matter's perspective, it's truly an honor to work with people who are so passionate about solving a problem that is so significant for so many people. The best part of my job is working with entrepreneurs like all of you. So congratulations to all of you on what you've built and what you're building. And best of luck to all of you as you continue your journeys.